What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh video and back with another new format sort of guide. I don't really feel like calling them guides anymore just because these videos are largely just going over the new card pool rather than going through the actual metagame of the format itself. But we're diving into TeleDAD format. That's the next format that I'm going to cover on the channel. And it is a pretty big one because it's the first format in the 5Ds era. We've made it through DM, we've made it through GX, and now we're in 5Ds. And 5Ds is important in the game's history for a variety of reasons. The big one, though, being that a new type of summoning mechanic is now in the game. Synchro monsters. It's a pretty momentous time. And this format also is a pretty momentous change from the previous format because so many new cards were added, and so many good new cards were added too, that it will be a lot to go through. So we're going to be diving in to the new cards, and then we'll show off a sort of example deck list at the end of the video. And then if you want gameplay, stay tuned to the channel. We're going to be having a ton of TeleDAD gameplay on the channel in the future, so subscribe if you want to see that. And yeah, that should be a lot of fun. But anyways, diving into this ban list here, because we got to start with the ban list that TeleDAD's based around. Now, TeleDAD is the format that's based around SJC Houston in January 2009. So it uses the ban list that's September 2008 in the TCG. And that ban list, it didn't really change like too much on the top side of things. I think like there's a lot of adjustments like the semi-limited list and things like that. But in terms of forbidden things, not really much changed. The big things are that now Dark Magician of Chaos is banned, Disc Commander is banned as well, along with Premature Burial. So Premature Burial getting banned before Monster Reborn is kind of funny, because Monster Reborn, they really want to bring that back for some reason, but Premature Burial is now banned along with Call the Haunted. So you've lost a bit more access to the graveyard there. You don't have access to Dark Magician of Chaos to do these crazy plays that the DAD return decks could potentially go into. Yes, they did ban Dimension Fusion on the previous list. That sort of limited the power of those plays a bit. But I guess they just want to just take it out behind the shed and get rid of a DMOC, which is probably a good thing because this thing is a crazy combo enabler. So it's good to get that gone. Disc Commander, this thing is also a thing that can enable some pretty nasty combos because you can actually manage to recycle it, get a bunch of value off it. That's very good. So it makes sense why they banned this as well. And of course, Premat is just kind of busted, right? Being able to bring back monsters from the graveyard for basically free is very good. There is some counterplay to it, like Mystical Space Typhoon or Dispel and Trap removal like that. But overall, this thing is just very strong, especially now that we're in a format with Synchro monsters. And I will get into how you actually make Synchro monsters and what they do. But just know that getting a free monster on the field is very good for that sort of type of monster there. Now, going through just some of the other banned cards here, I'm not going to go through every single card on the list since a lot of it is familiar to people who have been following the channel for a while and know some of the other retro formats around this time. I will say there are no Chaos monsters in the format, so you don't have to worry about that. In addition, Ring of Destruction's banned, so you don't have to worry about that potentially ending a game. You know, a lot of the hand rips are banned. Actually, all the main spell hand rips, like so Delinquent Duo, Confiscation, Forceful Sentry, those are all banned. Snatch Field, Change of Heart are banned as well. Some draw cards like Graceful and Pot are banned. You've got Dark Hole and Raigeki banned too, so that's some of your monster destruction gone. But I think besides that, like, those are the big things. Magician of Faith is banned for whatever reason. I don't think this necessarily needs to be banned at this point in the game, but they did ban it, so there's getting rid of even more ways to get back spells from grave. But that's going to be all I'll say about the forbidden section of the list. Let's dive into the limited section and see what changed there. So the limited section of the list, again, not much really changed. I mean, there were more changes here than forbidden, but I don't think they really, like, impact the game as much as some other stuff in the game's history in terms of ban list changes. So like Breaker the Magical Warrior, that thing is now limited. So, you know, you can only use one of this, whereas before it was forbidden. So I don't know why they banned Breaker, especially at this point in the game's history, but now they're sort of walking that back a bit, which I think makes sense. Cyber Dragon also limited now. This thing was semi-limited, so they're just sort of limiting the amount of copies you can play of this. This is a bit unfortunate for some machine decks, because if you want to make like a Cyber Twin Dragon or Cyber End Dragon or something like that, you can't really do that anymore. You can use Proto Cyber Dragon and some stuff like that, but it's a bit trickier for you. And also, if you want to play like Future Fusion sort of game plan, having only one Sidra in the deck is kind of disastrous for that, because if you draw the one Sidra, then it can be a bit tricky to actually use that Future Fusion to send a bunch of machines, revealing Chimeric Overdragon. But I think this is ultimately a good thing. Again, having access to just free bodies is pretty good in this format, and this is a free body, so it's good that this thing got limited, I think. Gores is also limited now in this format, and it is legal now. So I will be talking about Gores a bit later, but Gores is a card that really does change the way the game is played. And I mean, that's a very, very big change here that was added to the format. And it's, I think, a good change. I think Gores is relatively healthy for formats like these, but it is one to know about. Also, some more combo cards did get limited. So Monster Gate and Reasoning, both of which were unlimited up to this point, are now limited here. Just limit the power of those sort of Monster Gate Reasoning style decks. Although with Democ gone, I don't think this is really necessary. But I understand why they'd get rid of this, because those decks, if they are able to pop off, can be very good. So I think that makes some sense. But I actually will go through like a fair amount of this limited list. Because I think that limited cards are more important to know about in a format than the forbidden cards, because limited cards are cards that are very powerful and that will be showing up in decks. So these are things that you need to be aware of and things that you need to be playing around or adding to your own decks. So in addition to the ones I mentioned, we got Card Trooper here. There's a very good card to mill 3, buff up to 1900 attack, and then if it's destroyed, you get to draw a card. So that's very, very good overall. Very good also in specific decks like Lightsworn, or just in any deck that wants to fill up their graveyard. DD Warrior Lady is a good Rota search and also does banish your opponent's thing, so that's kind of nice. Elemental Stratos is a sort of beating heart of the hero engine, and made to play this engine, so it is very good to know about. Exodia pieces are all limited, which is kind of funny. Exodia is really bad at this point. This is more for like flavor text, honestly. But it is good to know that this is still in the format. If you want to play an alt win con, that's kind of funny. Gores, as I mentioned. Green Baboon is for certain Baboon decks. Like you can play a beast deck that, you know, tries to turbo this thing out, especially like a Baboon burn deck. I don't think those decks are that good in this format, but maybe they will see some play if you'll experiment with them more. But this is sort of a relic of a bygone time, in my opinion. Marshmallon's here as well. This is more, I think, also sort of a relic of the past, because this could be good in like Monarch decks that want to, you know, tribute over it and also deal a bit of burn on top of that. But I don't really think this is that good in this format. Morphing Jar is a way to recycle your hand, can be very powerful in certain decks, but I don't think you'll be seeing it all too often. Gramble is a card that can potentially cause problems, bouncing back certain things that you know, you don't necessarily want bounce back because they're resilient to things besides bouncing back. So Gramble could be something that like you do encounter and it's something to know about, but not many decks do play it as far as I know. Night Assailant is limited here just because when it's semi-limited, you know, you can sort of form a Night Assailant loop. So this thing probably won't see much play, but it's good to know about. Rise of the Storm Monarch is limited here as well. Very powerful tribute monster. They can spin back an opponent's monster or spell or anything, honestly. And that's very, very good. So very good to know about. Although Monarch decks are not the most popular thing right now, this card is very strong. Sangan here is a card that shows up in a lot of decks. Can search out monster from your deck to your hand. Very, very good card overall. Sniper here is a card that's a bit tricky to evaluate. Like, it doesn't show up in too many decks, but if decks do want to have a good discard outlet, this is a very, very good one for that. And it's sort of like the best worst card in the game, I like to call it, because, like, you know, if it goes well and you actually get your die rolls right, then this thing is crazy. You can just pop your opponent's entire board. If it goes poorly, though, you're just discarding cards for basically no value on board, which can be its own value, right? Like, if you pitch Destiny Hero Militias or things like that, that can be good. But it can definitely be a very frustrating card to play with. Treeborn Frog for Monarch decks mainly. Again, Monarch decks aren't the most popular thing, but it is good to know about. Twin-Headed Behemoth is mainly here just for a ruling sort of issue. This card has not really been that good for a very long time, so it will basically never come up in the games you play, most likely. And then the other Exodia pieces here. For the spells, we got Advanced Ritual Art for Demise OTK decks, although I don't think those are necessarily the best, even if this thing was unlimited, but it is here. So if you want to play that sort of deck, you're going to have a much tougher time. Brain Con to take control of your opponent's thing. Very, very strong in this format. It's for reasons that you'll see when I go over the Synchro monsters. Card Destruction here to pitch your entire hand and your opponent's entire hand. This is mainly used for like combo-oriented decks, or decks that want to fill up their graveyard, like potentially zombies could play this, although it is a -1, so it is a bit risky to play in that capacity. We got Fisher here to get rid of your opponent's monster. Smashing Rat also on this list. They just, you know, binned a bit of 1-for-1 removal. I don't think these are necessarily the best cards in the world, especially given some of the Synchro monsters that are in the format, but they are on the list. Future Fusion, as I mentioned, Cyber Dragon is now limited, so this thing is going to be a lot less powerful, but it is still here. True Nade and Heavy Storm are just back row removers, so very, very good if you want to make an aggressive push. True Nade can also have the added benefit of bouncing back cards that you maybe don't want up on your turn, but you do still want to retain control of, like Royal Oppression. and Heavy Storm's just great at wiping everything. So these are very, very strong, and you do have to respect them. Maybe not committing too much back row into whatever your opponent has. Gold Star can be very good, just gets you a key piece of the combo that you need later on, or just pairs with things to bring things back from the banished zone. But I don't really think it's that good in this format. It is something that you can play if you want to, though. It's just a little bit slow. Level Limit Area B is a sort of stun card like Gravity Bind, like Sword of Revealing Light, like Wall of Revealing Light. These are all here because they're just annoying when you have a deck that plays a bunch of them. But I don't necessarily think they're the best in this format. They're just things that can potentially be annoying to play through. Limit Removal is for machine decks. Megamorph is also for sort of OTK decks as well. Neither of these are like that strong in this metagame, in my opinion, but they are good to know about if you want to build a deck like that. Monster Gate I mentioned already. Monster Reborn is cracked. This card is insanely good. Get back a monster from your grave or your opponent's grave. DD Crow is a card that does see play in this format quite a bit. So being able to reborn something from your opponent's grave is just incredibly strong and very hard for your opponent to actually deal with. So this card is very good. MST is more spell trap removal, very, very important to have. Most decks do play it. Overload Fusion for the Chimera Tech over Dragon decks, but again, those decks really take a hit. So I don't really think this thing is that, important. Scapegoat here. Again, this is something that I don't think is that important, but it can be useful to just get levels on board for your synchro monsters. So that is something that maybe you could do something with. But overall, I think this card's sort of a relic of a bygone era on this list. And so I don't necessarily think it needs to be here, as many decks that do play a bunch of synchro things do not play this. Smashing Around I mentioned already, Swords I mentioned already, and United We Stand sort of another sort of OTK enabler. I don't think this thing is necessarily that powerful. Most decks won't play it, but it is something to be aware of if you want to build a deck like that, I guess. For the traps against Ceasefire, this is mainly used in burn strategies, but if you're up against Flipvoke strategy, which very few decks are, this could be something to have in your side deck for that. Although, again, very few decks do play a ton of flip monsters, so it's probably not something to even side. We get Crush Card Virus here. Very, very powerful card. A lot of decks do play this as well. And this is something that, turns a lot of people away from the format, besides the fact that the format is, putatively tier 0. This thing is, I think, less frustrating than a lot of people make it out to be. I understand why it is very frustrating, but I do think that, yeah, and maybe it's just my sort of priorities are out of whack, but I honestly think this thing is less frustrating than Trap Dash Shoot, which is weird to say, because both give you like perfect information and things like that. But I think the fact that Trap Dash Shoot lets you choose something to send back to your opponent's deck to basically just tear apart their entire combo, whereas Crush Card Virus, like, your combo could potentially still be alive after this thing is activated. I think it does make Crush Card Virus a little bit better. Also, you can sort of play around Crush Card Virus a little bit better than you can Dash Shoot. Like, you can potentially have a read when your opponent has it or not. And so I do think that this thing is less frustrating for me than Dash Shoot. But that's just my own personal opinion. I know that many people do not hold that opinion. Either way, both these cards are going to be played in a lot of different decks, so they are very good to know about. Magic Cylinder is another sort of stally burn card. Again, not really that powerful in this format, but it is good to know about. Mind Crush is very powerful as well, especially if you pair it with something like Dash Shoot or Crush Card. So beta decks can play this, especially in mirror matches where you kind of know what your opponent might have and what you need to really get out of the way for you to actually be able to do your plays. So this thing is very good. I don't think it sees too much like main deck play in a bunch of different decks, but it is very powerful in certain decks. And so it is definitely something you can include. Mirror Force, very strong card. And, this thing will come up. You do have to play around it sometimes. And so it is good to know about. Geometrio for burn decks. Again, I don't think those burn decks are that strong in this format, but locking down your opponent's zones is pretty decent. Of course, in this format, now that Synchro monsters exist, this card becomes a lot worse because your opponent can just Synchro off using the tokens. So it's not really the best in that capacity, but it is something that burn decks can play. Return from the Dimension, this is good for certain decks that would want to use it. Like if you are playing against a deck that banishes a lot, then you do have to keep this in mind. And if you are playing a deck that banishes a lot, you might want to consider using this thing in your deck. Transmigration Prophecy is basically like a version of DD Crow. It does have a little bit more applications outside of that, but you can't use it without setting it for a turn. So it does make it a little bit worse than Crow in my opinion. So I don't think many decks do play this, but it might be a good side deck card. Or maybe a main deck card if you want to take your opponent by surprise. Drunk Tribute, another card you have to play around, so you can't commit too many summons into an opponent's back row that you don't know. And Ultimate Offering here is just a way to spam out a bunch of monsters on field. This can come up in certain decks. Certain decks can potentially utilize this, especially if they've got searchers that can then search out more things, once they leave the graveyard after being summoned out with Ultimate Offering. But I don't really think this thing sees that much play in this format. I don't think it's that strong, so it's not really something that you have to keep on your mind always. It is something that if you want to cook up a crazy brew, you might want to have in the back of your mind, though, for something that might enable that. That's going to do it for the limited list here. I do have Dandelion in the side deck here because this was listed on the limited list along with like Sixth Sense and Return or Temple of the Kings, you know, for the forbidden section of the list. But these cards were not out in the TCG, so you don't really have to worry about them for the list here and for the format as a whole. But let's dive into the semi-limited list before diving into the actual new cards added to this format. So the semi-limited list here actually received the most revisions of any section of the list here, which is kind of interesting to see. They're really trying to figure out what to do with the semi-limited list, and they sort of just throw a bunch of problematic cards here that they still want people to have access to, but they don't want to necessarily be like a Saki 1 of. They're like, let's make a Saki 2 of. So we've got a bunch of boss monsters here. We got Dark Arm Dragon, which was already on, or no, I guess this was unlimited beforehand, according to Wikipedia, but I thought this was on the previous list. I don't know. Either way, Judgment Dragon is now semi-limited as well. So the two boss monsters that represent the light and the dark, they're both semi-limited now. Manticore of Darkness, this thing has been on for a long time because it can just do weird loops. Mask of Darkness still on the list, doesn't really need to be here. Necroface on the list because it can enable like weird banish OTK decks that basically just empty jar mill you out by banishing everything with Necroface and stuff. Phantom of Chaos is just here for, I guess, dark decks. They were a bit worried about this thing, especially like if you think about like Edison format with Phantom Norlords. That is a deck you can play, even if it's not the most consistent and can be very bad to get like sacked by it. And so it's not necessarily the healthiest thing in the format, so it makes sense why they're semi-limiting it here. Rescue Cat, kind of same thing. This thing cannot like I don't think it's the best in a lot of decks that are running around. Like Gladiator Beast can use it, but like they don't really play. I mean, I guess they could play a ton of copies of it, but I don't think the semi-limited will really make a difference for that deck, especially because there are other decks that can now compete against that a lot better. Book of Moon here at 2 copies. This thing was already semi-limited. I think it's a good spot for it. Very powerful card, but also like very flexible. So I don't think it's a card that people feel bad on the Book of Moon flipped on them. It's just like a relatively fair card that is very good. So it makes sense why they have it at 2 here. Card of Safe Return is here because zombies get a lot better in this format. So you want to limit the power of that. Chain Strike here at 2 because burn decks, they're not really doing much. So you can probably allow that back. Foolish Burial also at 2. This thing does have some applications in the format, especially in things like zombies and Lightspawns, but not the craziest card in the world just yet. So this thing is now at 2. Magical Stone Excavation also at 2. And then Knock is now at 2, coming off the limited section of the list to the semi-limited part. And I think that makes sense because Knock is like, it's a relatively slow card, and a lot of decks aren't like setting a ton of things. So like you don't really need to worry about Knock as much. It's a pretty fair card, I think, in this format overall. I think part of the really spicy stuff that happens in this format is the unlimited section. So let's dive into that because these cards were all semi-limited beforehand, but now they are off the list, and that leads to some really weird things that can happen. Malicious is off the list for some reason. They had it right, semi-limited to 2, so that way it's like only one form of extension, but now you have this at 3 copies, so that means that you can banish one, bring out another, do something with that other one to get it engraved, and then banish that one and bring out another Malicious on top of that. So this thing is crazy good in this format, and it's at 3 for whatever reason. Lord of Darkness also at 3 copies, so you can dig really deep into your deck. And Rhoda also at 3 copies, and that's kind of interesting because Rhoda, for most of its history, has been on the semi-limited or limited list, and for some reason this format, they were like, let's just unlimit it, see what happens, you know? And this thing is very, very good. So, you know, it can search out Stratos, it can search out Dark Grepper, it can get a lot of plays going for you. So very, very good card, and for some reason that 3. The other cards off the semi-limited list don't really matter as much, in my opinion. Light and Darkness Dragon is sort of a relic of a bygone time. Can be very good in decks that can support it. But frankly, most decks are doing other things, so you don't really need to worry about this as much. Mage Power, this could have come off the list a long time ago. It's kind of like United We Stand, where it is something that can potentially form an OTK, but like, is it the most consistent thing in the world? Is it the best thing that you can be doing in this format? No, on both counts. So it's not really worth playing. Royal Decree is the last card off the semi-limited list here. And this is, I think, a good thing, just giving more tools for decks to stop trap cards. I think that's fine, especially because, like, you know, the best decks in the format are not decks that are like spamming out a ton of traps. And this can potentially give you some advantages against decks that like set up Royal Oppression or something like that. So those are the decks that, you know, are sort of the best in the format, the ones that can play those sort of floodgatey traps. So I think Decree stopping that, yes, it is a floodgate, but it's floodgating the floodgates. So I feel like that is pretty good. And so it's probably good to have this thing at 3. But that's going to do it for the list. Let's actually dive into some new cards and see what makes this format very, very important in the game's history. The reason why this time in the game's history was so important was the introduction of Synchro monsters. Now, if you weren't around at the time and you came to Yu-Gi-Oh! A bit later, you might be like, Synchro monster, what's the big deal? You know, those are running around. in different formats, in different capacities and power levels. And they've been doing that for quite some time. You know, if you look at the entire course of the game's history, they've been around for more of the history of the game than less, right? Like over half the game has had synchro monsters. But at the time, it was really big because, you know, up until this point, like in the TCG at least, the game's core rules hadn't really changed that much. And this was a major shakeup to those rules for a variety of reasons. One, we got synchro monsters. Two, the extra deck was now limited to 15 cards and was called the extra deck instead of the fusion deck. Before this point, you could play as many fusion monsters as you wanted in your fusion deck, but now it was limited. So you actually had to consider space when actually building these sorts of decks. And also, synchro monsters were just very good. You know, Konami did push this sort of archetype. It's not really an archetype, but this sort of type of monsters with some very, very good ones. But honestly, they didn't really have to do much because just having a very easily accessible monster like this is very good. So what is a synchro monster for people who are unfamiliar with this type of monster? A synchro monster is a white bordered card that resides in your extra deck, which is formerly the fusion deck, that you can make generally by just taking a tuner and a non-tuner monster whose levels add up to the level of the synchro monster, setting them both to grave, and bring out the synchro monster, and that's known as a synchro summon. Now, some synchro monsters do have specific conditions that need to be met for the summon to take place. For instance, Junk Warrior, which was the sort of face of the synchro structure deck that was released at the time. This card needs a specific tuner to actually be made, and that's Junk Synchron. And the condition where like the levels have to add up to the overall level still applies, even if there's an additional condition like Junk Warrior has. But it does make for a very easily accessible monster from your extra deck, a lot more easily accessible than fusion monsters, which generally had to be made with like polymerization and things like that. Now, I think a lot of people view this as a point where the game irrevocably changes, but I think looking up to this point, there were other things that simulated this sort of summon up until this point, right? Like if you look at Contact Fusion with things like Gladiator Beast, right? Going into a Guy's Yaris is basically just a synchro monster, right? Because all you do is bring out two monsters that meet certain conditions, and you shuffle them back in the deck, bring out the monster. So instead of going to grave, they go back to deck, and instead of having to add up to the level, they just have to be Bestiari and like another Glad Beast. But the game had been experimenting with these sort of summoning mechanics up to this point, right? So I think that synchro monsters as a whole, while they are definitely a lot more generic, and they allow other decks to actually go into this sort of thing like Glad Beast did, I do think that they are not as dramatic a departure from the way the game was as people like to make it out to be, right? I think the big departures from, you know, how things were really came in like DAD return format when Phantom Darkness came out and just accelerated the pace of play of the game so much. And I think within that context, like these are not even like the craziest changes to the game up to this point. So I think that like, even if you are someone who is like, you know, I'm never playing the game after synchro monsters get released, the only true Yu-Gi-Oh is the Yu-Gi-Oh I remember that had like, you know, only fusion monsters in your fusion deck, right? I think it is worth trying out, like especially if you have played things like DAD Return or Gladiator format and you thought those were fine. I don't think the synchro monsters are going to break the game for you, right? But I do think they do represent a difference in like sort of philosophy, whereas, you know, previously those sort of contact fusion style monsters were locked behind certain archetypes. Now multiple decks can play these things, and so they sort of give every deck a boss monster now, which is good to note. And also it's good to note that a lot of the times the boss monsters are going to be the same things, right? You could be playing two different decks and both of them end on a Stardust Dragon, right? So it does, I think I can understand why people are upset that like it sort of makes decks lose a little bit of their identity. But I also think that the boss monster shouldn't be the end all be all of decks. I think that, you know, the way they get into them can also matter. And not every deck does want to make these sort of synchro monsters. Some make other things. So I think that it adds another tool for different decks to use, but it doesn't fundamentally change the way the game is played. But that was a bit too much like philosophy and stuff about these things, and let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments below. I'm curious to hear what people think, but what we're here for right now is to go through these cards. So let's go through the cards. So I'm starting with Junk Warrior because it was the face of the Synchro starter deck. It was my first sort of like Synchro monster that I got because, you know, you could pull things from Duelist Genesis, sure. But, you know, the starter deck had guaranteed synchros for you and explained how to make a synchro monster and all that stuff. So I got the starter deck, and so Junk Warrior will always hold a special place in my heart. And Junk Warrior is a level 5 synchro that's made with Junk Synchron and one non-tutor monster. And if it's synchro summoned, it gains attack equal to the total attack of all level 2 or lower monsters you currently control. Now, Junk Warrior is not a very good synchro monster in this format. You can do things with it, but frankly, it's mainly just here as a way to teach the sort of strategy to people, right? And to teach how to actually do the summon. It's very, very easy to make because Junk Synchron is a level 3 monster, warrior tuner, 1300 attack, 500 defense, and then when it's normal summon, you can target one level 2 or lower monster in your graveyard, special summon that target in defense position, but negate its effects. So this makes Junk Synchron very easy to make because you summon out Junk Synchron, bring back level 2 monster, and then you've immediately got your Junk Warrior ready to go. So it makes sense why this would be the face of Synchro monsters, right? And the sort of structure deck had different ways to get other level 2s on field that we'll talk about a little bit later. But frankly, just going into a Junk Warrior and trying to make this thing big is not really what you want to be doing in this format, because there are other synchro monsters that are also very easy to make that are a little bit more generic. They don't need to necessarily require the one Junk Synchron to have, and that do a bit better things. So generally, you won't be seeing many decks playing Junk Warrior, but Junk Warrior is one of a series of synchro monsters that are all based around a specific synchron tuner and just, other monsters, I guess. But Nitro Warrior is the next one that was released. It's a level 7 warrior, 2900 attack, 1800 defense. It's made with Nitro Synchron and one or more non-tuner monsters. And then once during each of your turns, if you activate a spell card, this card gains 1000 attack during the next attack. This turn involving this card during damage calculation only. If this attacking card destroys an opposed monster by battle, after damage calculation, you can target one face-up defense position monster your opponent controls, change that target to attack position, then this card can make a second attack in a row on that monster. So this thing, if you're able to bring it out, can be very, very good. Allows you to get very aggressive. It is also a level 7, which there aren't too many level 7 synchro monsters in this format. There is one very important one that we will get to later on in this video. But, this sort of gives you another option. However, because it's very specific, needing Nitro Synchron to actually make, it's not really played that much because Nitro Synchron is not really that good of a card. It's a level 2 Fire Monster Machine Tuner. 300 attack, 100 defense, so that if this card is sent to the graveyard for the Synchro summon of a Nitro Synchro monster, draw one card. So this thing can draw you a card upon using it to Synchro summon out the Nitro Warrior. So that's just another benefit to it. But frankly, that's a bit of a convoluted setup to actually get. Having 5 in terms of the other levels on your field is a bit tricky to do in this format, or at least trickier to do than some of the other synchro setups that you can do in this format. So this did not really see much play. And it probably won't see much play until certain support cards come out for it later on in the game's history. Turbo Synchron is the next one, which makes Turbo Warrior. Let's start with the Synchron, though. There's a level 1 Wind, 100 attack, 500 defense. It says when this card declares an attack, you can change the attack target to defense position. When you take battle damage while this card is attacking, you can special summon one monster from your hand with attack less than or equal to the battle damage you took. So this is sort of a way to set up your levels for the Turbo Warrior summon, and can also potentially switch a monster to defense position and get out a big monster that you have. Of course, you have to take damage in that trade, but it could potentially work out for you. Unfortunately, I don't think this thing is that good, especially because Turbo Warrior actually is very good. So it would be nice if Turbo Synchron was a bit better to actually facilitate playing this thing, but as is, beggars can't be choosers. Turbo Warrior is a level 6 synchro monster, 2000 attack, 1500 defense, made with Turbo Synchron and one or more non-tuner monsters. And then when this card declares an attack on a level 6 or higher synchro monster, have the attack of the attack target until the end of the damage step. This card cannot be targeted by the effects of level 6 or lower monsters. So this thing is very good for a variety of reasons. One, because synchro monsters are the bread and butter of this format. A lot of decks do really like to go into them, and so Turbo Warrior is a great counter to that. And also because there are a lot of monsters that have good effects that are level 6 or lower, and this thing is unaffected by that. So if you can bring this thing out, it's very good. Obviously, though, it's very hard to bring out because Turbo Synchron is a bit bad, right? And having 5 levels, again, is a bit tricky to do. So, I will say, if you are doing a Synchron deck, you can potentially make 5 levels just by going Junk Synchron into, a Warrior monster and then going into Junk Warrior. Speed Warrior is the one I chose here because the iconic pairing with Junk Synchron. Speed Warrior is not very good, though. It's a level 2 Warrior, 900 attack, 400 defense, 1 for battle phase. If this card is normal summon this turn, you can make the attack become double its original attack until the end of the battle phase. You might as well just play an 1800 beater instead, unless you're specifically setting up for this combo, but they're just better level 2s you can play. But even if you do just set up a Junk Warrior as your level 5 there, you'd have to take a normal summon to actually set this thing up, bring it out, and then you've got a bit of a harder time to then, wait a turn, normal summon out one of these things, and then synchro off with it. And they're all just, there are better level 5 synchros out there, in my opinion at least. So, I don't think these synchro monsters really will see much play here, but maybe later on in the game's history, they'll see a bit more play. Now, Before I dive into the other tuner monsters, I want to just talk about some of the more generic synchros, because just from these synchron monsters here and the warriors they make, you might get the impression that synchro monsters are not very good overall, or there's too many hoops to actually jump through to make them. But that's just frankly not the case, because synchro monsters, like, I mean, I said that Konami didn't have to push this to actually make them work, but they definitely did push them because they really wanted them to work, because these synchro monsters are crazy good. So let's start with the level 8s. Level 8, on paper, it seems hard to make. It's actually very easy to make in this format through combos that we'll discuss later. But Stardust Dragon is one of the most iconic and popular level 8s that you're going to be making in this format. It is a level 8 dragon, 2500 attack, 2000 defense. It's made with a tuner and one or more non-tuner monster, that is. And when a card or effect is activated that would destroy a card in the field, you contribute this card, negate the activation if you destroy it, and then during the end phase, if this effect was activated this turn and was not negated, you can special summon this card from your graveyard. So this thing is just a basically recurable negate, right? You negate your opponent's destruction effect, bring this thing back, and then they have to deal with it next turn as well. It also has a fair amount of attack and defense, so it can be a bit tricky for your opponent to actually get over this thing. Just such a good card. Crazy good. And also, I think, relatively fair. And that may seem weird, given that it is so powerful. But I do think, like, if your opponent only has one form of removal in their hand, they're not just going to activate that into a Stardust Dragon and then just be like, well, I guess I just lost out on that. They're going to try and structure their plays to actually bait out the Stardust Dragon effect and then get their removal off, right? So I do think that there are ways to play around Stardust Dragon. I think it's a very fair boss monster, all things considered. And there are also other ways that, your opponent can get over the Stardust Dragon. So I think it's very good there. Next up, we got Red Dragon Archfiend, which is the sort of counterpart to Stardust Dragon. Not made as much, but when it is made, it can be very useful. As a level 8 Dark Dragon Synchro, 3000 attack, 2000 defense. It says 1 tuner and 1 or more non-tuner monster. And then after damage calculation, if this card attacked an opponent's defense position monster, destroy all defense position monsters your opponent controls. And then once per turn during your end phase, destroy all other monsters you control that did not declare an attack this turn. This card must be face up on the field to activate and resolve this effect. So it does come on the downside, but it does come with the upside of being able to deal with some pesky defense position monsters and set up for an aggressive play. But frankly, the use cases of this are a little bit more niche than things like Stardust Dragon and some other level 8s that we'll talk about later in the video. So, I don't really think this thing is as good, but when it does come up, it is good to have. And one of the nice things about Synchro monsters is that you can just have them in your extra deck just for those niche cases, right? You're probably not going to play 3 Red Dragon Archfiends in your extra deck, but if you just have one for the case where it can come up, then you can potentially go into it and deal with that. And that's also something that you have to keep in mind when you're playing around certain things, because if you know what your opponent might have in their extra deck, you can sort of play differently to play around different things they can go into. So I think that this is again, not really the most popular card, but it is a card that shows up in extra decks for those niche cases. Next up is Colossal Fighter, another level 8 Warrior Synchro. 1 tuner and 1 or more non-tuners make it. And it gains 100 attack for each warrior monster in your graveyard, which is, pretty big, especially given that this thing has 2800 attack already. And when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 warrior monster in either graveyard, special summon that target. So this is a great way to, sort of just bring itself back over and over again, so it can't really be destroyed by battle. Also, if you crash into your opponent's Colossal Fighter, I believe that you can target their Colossal Fighter in their graveyard first, so you get to bring it back, and then they don't get the effect of the Colossal Fighter that was there. I could be wrong about that, though. I might be wrong about that, but there's some interesting edge cases with this thing. You can also use it to bring back other warrior monsters, potentially like Goyo Guardian, which is one of the most cracked synchro monsters in this format. Now, on Dueling Book here, you see that its materials say 1 Earth Tuner and 1 or more non-tuner monster. That's actually not the case in TeleDAD format. That's a later errata. And when we play these old retro formats, we play with the original card text. And so the original card text of Goyo Guardian just said 1 tuner and 1 or more non-tuners. So this can be made with just generic materials. You don't need to worry about the tuner being an Earth monster, which is good because the tuners that see a lot of play in this format are not Earth. So this is a level 6, 20 attack, 2000 defense. When this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sent it to the graveyard, you can special summon that monster to your field in defense position. So this thing is very, very strong. If you attack over like a Stardust Dragon, you get to take control of it and have that on your field to potentially use its effect or just get more aggressive. This thing just super, super good. You can also use it to potentially take an opponent's monster and synchro off with that in addition. This thing just crazy powerful. If it attacks over like Elemental Hero Stratus, you get to use the Stratus effect. Like, there's so many interesting use cases for this thing, and this thing is just a powerhouse. So level 6 is also very easy to go into. All you need is like a level 4 monster and a level 2 tuner, and there are a lot of level 2 tuners in the format that are very good. So this thing is one of the most common synchro monsters that you'll see. Lastly, we got Gaia Knight, the Force of Earth for this section. The level 6 normal monster, 2600 attack, 800 defense. Not really a reason to go into this because Goyo Guardian just sort of is this, but better in every way. But, you know, it's good to know about at least. Maybe if you've gone through all your Goyo Guardians and you need the Gaia Knight, I don't know, maybe you do that. But it's good to know about. It doesn't really show up in many extra decks, but I just wanted to mention it here. There will be other synchro monsters that I'll be talking about later in the video in their own devoted sections, because I like to do these guides, breaking them up by sort of like either card pack or, you know, sort of shared theme. And frankly, there were too many cards to actually do it by card pack, so we're just going to do it by shared theme for this video. So we'll be discussing those other synchro monsters in those sections, and then we'll sort of be showing off an example deck list at the end of the video that will give you an idea of what a standard sort of extra deck does look like for most decks. And that can change depending on what specific deck you're playing, but it should apply to most of the decks and formats, so you should be able to get an idea of what you need to look out for and potentially add to your own extra deck if you play this format. So let's talk about some of the other tuners in the format. Now, a lot of these tuners do not see play because they're just better tuners that you can play, and I'll get to those later. But they are good to know about, and I think that they're interesting because they do sort of show a bit of the design philosophy behind what Konami was trying to do for their initial waves of tuners. So you've got them falling into different sort of categories. Some of the tuners are a bit hard to deal with. Dark Resonator is level 3 Fiend tuner, 1300 attack, 300 defense. And the first time this card will be destroyed by battle each turn, it is not destroyed. So this thing can stick around a little bit. There's another tuner later that can also stick around a bit, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Shiba Warrior Taro can also stick around a bit, although it's a bit more fragile than the Dark Resonator and the other monster that I'll talk about later. And the level 2 Beast Warrior Tuner, 800 attack, 600 defense. It said this card cannot be destroyed by battle, and when a card on the field is destroyed by battle or a card effect, return this face-up card to its owner's hand. So it returns to the hand like a good boy if things are going bad. But frankly, it can just set you back on normal summons, so this thing doesn't really see much play. Frankly, Dark Resonator doesn't really see much play either, but I could definitely see it seeing play in the future, but I don't think Shiba Warrior Taro will really see much play at all. Next up, we got synchro monsters, or not synchro monsters, but tuners that sort of give you a benefit when you actually synchro summon with them. So Council Lily is one of them. It's level 3 Earth Fairy Tuner, 400 attack, 1500 defense. Says when this card is sent to the graveyard for a synchro summon, you can pay 500 life points to have that synchro monster gain 1000 attack until the end phase. So sort of boosts up the synchro monster that you bring out with it. Doesn't come up too often, but it can come up, so it is good to know about. Cinder Sprocket is a level 1 Fiend Tuner, 400 attack, 0 defense, and if this card's sent to the graveyard for the synchro summon of a Dark Synchro monster, you can destroy one face-up spell or trap card. So that is a bit situational. Like, if we look at the attributes of these synchro monsters here, Red Dragon Archfiend and Colossal Fighter are both dark, and some of the synchro monsters that we'll talk about later are dark as well. But frankly, it's kind of awkward to get Sinister Sprocket into those monsters, so I don't think this thing is that good. But it is an interesting effect because it does sort of reveal that Konami's trying out different things, right? They're like, maybe if we add tuners that give you an effect upon being synchro summoned with, maybe that'll be good, right? And Nitro Synchron does that as well. So it's kind of neat to see that design philosophy there. They're also synchro monsters, or not synchro monsters, but tuners that just sort of do their own thing, right? They're tuner monsters, but they have other effects as well. You don't really need to worry about like actually synchro summoning with them first. You can just use the effects as the effects if you want to. Rose Warrior Revenge is a very interesting one because it's the first level 4 tuner monster in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, and it's also the only one in this format. So level 4 tuner, warrior, 600 attack, 600 defense. Says when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, inflict 300 damage to your opponent. And it's important to note that this is a warrior, and Rhoda is now unlimited, so you can potentially play this in a deck as a free level 4 tuner that you can go into. But frankly, they're just decks that can get out tuners quicker, so that doesn't really see much play in this format, but it's good to know about. For other warrior tuners, there's also Comrade Swordsman, the Landstar, level 3 warrior. It says all warrior type monsters you control gain 400 attack. And you'll also see a bit of a focus in the Duels Genesis and Crossroads of Chaos, which are the first 2 core sets that come out in the Synchro era. A bit more of a focus, less on archetypes, but more on just types themselves and attributes themselves, which is kind of interesting given that the end of GX really focused a lot on archetypes and really drove home that archetypes are the way that you want to be playing. But in the Duels Genesis and Crossroads of Chaos, they're trying to shake that up, go back to the roots of the game, and get into types and attributes a bit more. So we'll be getting into the type and attribute support that does come out in those sets. But it's kind of interesting to see them like trying to shift their design philosophy up, seeing what they can do potentially in this new era. Next up, we got Jute Fighter. There's another warrior, level 2, 700 attack, 900 defense. And once per turn, you can change one face-up attack position monster your opponent controls face-up defense position. This can help to get over certain things. Like you summon this thing out while you already have a monster, switch your opponent's big guy to defense, and then synchro summon this and the other monster into something that can then get over that thing. But because you're synchro summoning with this thing anyways, that won't really be coming up all too much. Especially because going into like a level 8 or a level 6, that is, which is what you'll commonly be able to go into, that can get over pretty much anything that your opponent can have already, except for something like a Red Dragon Archfiend or Colossal Fighter, I guess. So it's going to allow you to take those, but it's a very, very niche case. So I don't really think this thing is that good, but it's something that you can potentially consider playing if you want to. Next up, we got Magna Drago, another level 2 tuner here. It's a dragon, 1400 attack, 600 defense. That if this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, it gains 200 attack. So you can definitely see that over time, this thing could potentially get pretty big, but they're just bigger things off rip. Anyways, and because it's a tuner, you're probably just going to be using it for synchro summon. So the effect isn't really that good. We've also got Night's End Sorcerer, another monster with an effect that's not really that good. Level 2 Dark Spellcaster Tuner, 1300 attack, 400 defense. It says when this card is special summoned, you can target up to 2 cards in your opponent's graveyard and banish them. Not really the best effect. Could come up if you don't want your opponent having anything to revive. Potentially, like if they use Stardust effect and you summon out this thing, then you can banish it. But the fact that you need to special summon it makes it a bit more specific than a lot of the other things that we've seen here so far. So I don't really think it's that good. And also, tuner monsters don't have to be effect monsters, by the way, as well. So we've got Toon Warrior and Water Spirit, which are both normal monsters here, and they are both tuners. You know, there's a level 3 tuner and Water Spirit's a level 1 tuner. Neither of which are very good, but they are something that you can potentially play if you want to. Maybe if you're playing a normal focus deck, use these to go into like Guidate the Force of Earth, but frankly, those decks are just outclassed by everything else going on in the format. Now, tuner monsters aren't the only sort of support for synchro summoning. There are also some other things that can enable you to do that. Cobalt Hedgehog is one of the biggest ones. Level 2 Earth Machine, 800 attack, 800 defense, and then if this card's in your graveyard, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. You must control a tuner to activate and resolve this effect. So this basically is free material for your tuner monsters. So that can be very good, especially if you have like a Rose Warrior Revenge, summon this thing out, bring back the Cobalt from your graveyard, go into a Goyo, and then you're very good there. You can also potentially summon out Junk Synchron to bring this thing back, go into a Junk Warrior, and then still have this in grave and not banished, because it will have been brought back by the Synchron effect. So this thing is probably the best of these sort of tuner support monsters, I like to call them. But most decks don't play it. It's just a bit too finicky. And again, they've got no problem getting material on field to go into synchro summoned anyways. We've also got Noisy Gnat and Silent Strider, both of which do similar things. So you can basically send these from your hand to the graveyard to target one face-up monster on the field. Noisy Gnat raises the level by 1, and Silent Strider decreases the level by 1. Now you can potentially use this on your opponent's things, because I believe that these are quick effects. Most hand traps like this are. So I think that you could use this during your opponent's turn to reduce the level or increase the level, just mess up like some math with some synchro monsters, but frankly, it won't really come up that often because there are other good synchro monsters to go into at different levels, so your opponent can just go into that instead. You've sort of like wasted a card to do nothing. So you'd mainly just use these to modulate your own levels to go into a synchro monster that you want to go into, but that's also kind of bad because, you know, generally if you're playing a certain deck, right, you're setting up the deck to synchro summon the monster that you want to synchro summon out, and so these things will just be more of a nuisance than a help. But I do like that they are sort of like reverses of each other. One's noisy, one's silent. They have reverse attack and defense from each other. So that's kind of neat, but frankly not very good. Next up, we got some spells and traps to support actually making some synchro monsters. So we got Light Wave Tuning, the normal spell that says select one level 4 light monster you control is treated as a tuner monster while it's face up on the field. So this can give you ways to get into certain monsters that could be tough to go into otherwise, particularly like a synchro monster that we'll talk on later when we talk about more types and attributes that get support. But you can potentially use this to make anything if you want to. Frankly, though, there aren't really many level 4 light monsters that you'd really want to be playing this with. There is one later that we'll talk about as well that you can potentially use, and maybe Lightsworn wants to use this to just go into synchro monsters, which that deck didn't normally do. But frankly, this thing is not really that good. Then we got Revival Gift, the normal trap that says select one tuner monster from your graveyard and special summon it. Its effects are negated, and then special summon 2 Gift Fiend tokens to your opponent's side of the field. So this can enable you to sort of get into a synchro monster more easily, but your opponent will have material to make synchro monsters of your own. Now, one thing you can do is potentially bring these out in defense position, go into a Red Dragon Archfiend, attack into them, blow up the entire board there. Or if you can just get over them naturally, that can also work. But frankly, there's other better revival cards, I think. And so you don't really need to play this thing and give your opponent potential ways to crack back. We've also got other spells and traps that actually modulate level, like Synchro Boost, is an equipped spell that increases the level of an equipped monster by 1, and also it gains 500 attack. So that's pretty neat. Miniaturize the Exhaustive trap. This is something similar. And it actually reduces the level by 1. However, it's a bit awkward because that monster will also lose 1,000 attack. So if you're using it to modulate your own levels to go into synchro play, like, you need to be careful about when you use it. You can also use it just to sort of disrupt your opponent plays, either by reducing a monster level by 1, kind of like with Silent Strider or Noisy Gnat, or just when they attack in, using this thing to, get over that thing. So Miniaturize, I think, is a little bit more flexible than the Noisy Gnat Silent Striders, and probably even more flexible than Synchro Boost, but I still don't think it's really that good, because, like, there's better cards you can play instead. Now, there are also some cards that sort of pair with tuners or synchro monsters in general, which you can also talk about here. Battle Tuned is a pretty good one to quick play spell that removes from play 1 tuner monster from your graveyard and then target 1 face-up monster you control, and it will gain attack equal to the removed monster's attack. So that can potentially buff up a Toon monster pretty big, or any monster pretty big, because you got things like Toon Warrior or Rose Warrior Revenge that actually have a fair amount of attack. So you buff it up by like 1,600 or something, and that can potentially, like, just add a bit more extra damage or get you over something that your opponent might have. So this is a neat card. I think there are just other cards that are a bit better, because generally when you are playing the game, you want things that are guaranteed removal rather than like potential removal, like Battle Tuned. But the nice thing about Battle Tuned is that the increased attack does stick around, forever, as long as that monster's on field. So this can potentially give you like a bit more defense. It can give you a bit more just continual removal, because that monster can just keep goading over what your opponent has. So it's kind of neat in that regard. So I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. It's just there are other better cards that people do play, so that's why I didn't really see much play. But if it does ever, show up in a game, it could be pretty good. Next up, we got Synchro Blast Wave. This is a normal spell that says if you control a synchro monster, target 1 monster your opponent controls, destroy that target. Now, I think it's sort of like putting a hat on a hat. Like, you don't really need it. It's kind of very a win more card, because generally if you're going into a synchro monster, you're probably trying to go into something that can deal with what your opponent has anyways. So you don't really need this thing. It's just sort of a brick when you don't have the synchro monster. And also, it's not really effective against things like Stardust Dragon, for instance. So I don't think this thing is that good. You also got Synchronized Realm as a continuous spell. This each time you synchro summon a synchro monster, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. So this is just a bit of extra burn. But again, I don't really think it's necessarily. It's kind of like putting a hat on a hat. If you're going for synchro monster, you should be making a play that puts you in a good spot to potentially win the game. Anyways, so you don't really need the extra 500 burn damage. Next up, we got Desynchro. It's a normal spell. It says target 1 synchro monster on the field. Return that target to the extra deck. And then if all the monsters that were used for the synchro summon of that monster are in your graveyard, you can spell summon all of them. Now, the nice thing about this, it doesn't have to be your own synchro monster that you target. Of course, if you do target that own synchro monster, you can go into the materials on field to potentially go into a different synchro monster with the same level. For instance, let's say you've got Red Dragon Archfiend out, but you're worried that your opponent might have removal, so you don't want to attack into what they've got. You can go Desynchro on the Red Dragon Archfiend, bring that materials that made the Stardust Dragon there, or that made the Red Dragon, and go into Stardust Dragon to potentially protect against that. So this can be flexible on your own things. It can also just be a great removal card on your opponent's things, because you can just get rid of a synchro monster that they control. Kind of hard for your opponent to deal with, especially if they got like Stardust Dragon out. Desynchro can deal with that very, very nicely. But I will say, I think it's a little bit more situational than some of the other removal cards, like Phoenix Booming Blast, Compulsory Evacuation Device, things like that. Those can also deal with Stardust Dragon. And so I think Desynchro just doesn't quite cut it versus those. But it is a very interesting card to know about. And maybe it could see play in certain decks, but I don't really think it's that good. Next up, we got some traps, which are all pretty bad. Urgent Tuning is kind of like the synchro version of Super Poly, except Super Poly can target things on both sides of the field. It's unrespawnable, etc. Urgent Tuning just allows you to synchro summon during the battle phase. So this can be kind of neat for just getting a bit more damage on board, because you attack them with your monsters, then synchro summon into Urgent Tuning. But frankly, it's not really that good overall. You can also use it to like dodge like Mirror Forge or Dim Priz or things like that, because you attack in, go for Urgent Tuning, go for a synchro monster like in defense mode to dodge around Mirror Forge or things like that. So it's kind of neat. I just don't think it's that good. It's very, very situational. Next up, we got Synchro Deflector, the normal trap that says activate only when a face-up synchro monster you control is selected as an attack target. Negate the attack and destroy 1 monster your opponent controls. So this is a way to sort of protect your own monster and also destroy an opponent's monster. But again, it sort of falls into the same trap that a fair amount of cards do, which like it loses Stardust. So it's a bit situational as well, where you need to have that synchro monster on field. And if you've got that synchro monster on field, like, what are they going to be attacking into that with, right? They're probably just going to be removing it through other means. So this thing is not really that good, especially because other battle traps are more generic and also dodge around things like Stardust. Next up, we got Synchro Strike. This is a normal trap that says target Synchro Summon monster gain 500 attack for each Synchro material monster used to summon until the end phase. And again, this is sort of like putting a hat on a hat. If you got a Synchro monster out, it's probably going to have a lot of attack anyways. You don't necessarily need to add more to it. But that's going to do it for these sort of generic Synchro Summon and Tuner support cards that at least I found in the card pool here. I just think it's interesting, like the sort of things that they did with the release of this new summon mechanic. Anyways, now that we've gone over this sort of generic Synchro Summon support, let's dive into some more specific archetypes, and I guess not archetypes, but just types that actually end up supporting Synchro Monster a lot better than these sort of more generic things here. Now, of course, Synchro Monster were the big reason why the Duelist Genesis was such a wild set for people at the time, but another thing that happened that had never really happened before up to this point was that a new type entirely was released, and that is Psychic Monsters. Now, Psychic Monsters are their own type now. They're just like warriors, dragons, etc. There are cards that support them, and they do have a sort of common theme to them, which is kind of neat. Psychic Monsters generally, the monsters that are in your main deck, they cause you to pay life points to get certain effects. So basically, like, you get a powerful effect, but you're going a bit low on life. And the Synchro Monsters, on the other hand, sort of have effects that gain you life. So the idea is you're paying life with the main deck monsters, but then once you get a Synchro Monster, you'll be gaining back that life. So it's an interesting sort of balance there. Now, Psychic Monsters as a whole were sort of clearly meant to sort of be their own thing, right? You can like pair them together in interesting ways, and they do some interesting synergies like that. However, in TeleDAD format, the tele part of the format was emergency teleport, because people realized very quickly they didn't really need to play a whole psychic engine here. You can just play emergency teleport and a Krebens, which is a great level 2 tuner, and just go into some great Synchro Monsters that gave you a lot of flexibility and a lot of extension, because this is a great special summon card. It's a quick play spell that lets you special summon one level 3 or lower psychic monster from your hand or deck, but banish it during the end phase of the turn. That only happens if it's still on field at the end of the turn, so if you Synchro Summon with it, it winds up in your grave, which can be very useful for you. So basically what people would do is they'd, play a deck that was more like a sort of just, good stuff deck, right? You played the hero engine, you played Dark Monsters for Dad, you played Emergency Teleport to bring out the Krebens, and you just had a very, very flexible list that could go into level 8 Synchros like nobody's business. It can go into other level Synchros as well. It just had a lot of extension, a lot of draw power, and was just very, very good. And that is the TeleDAD deck that sort of took over this format, and that makes it tier 0. So Krebens itself is also a pretty good tuner. This is what I mentioned earlier when I talked about other tuners later on in the video that sort of also stick around. Level 2 tuner, that's 1200 attack, 400 defense, says when this card is targeted for an attack, you can pay 800 life points and then negate that attack. So this is a great way to sort of just keep it around on field. It can just survive if you need it to. And it's just another reason why this card is very good in the deck. Like, obviously, the main reason you're using it is to extend into your Synchro plays, but if you do need to sit on it for a bit, it can definitely do that quite well. Of course, there are other, level 2 or level 3 or lower Psychic Monster that you can bring out with Emergency Teleport that can be pretty good. In terms of the tuners, we got Mind Master, which is level 1 Psychic Tuner, 100 attack, 200 defense, that allows you to pay 800 life points and tribute 1 Psychic Monster. To special summon 1 level 4 or lower Psychic type monster from your deck in face-up attack position. This thing is banned in the modern game because it's just very, very powerful. Just extending into whatever you want. And it was pretty strong at the time, although you kind of have to play a devoted Psychic deck to actually make use of it. And I might be showing off a devoted Psychic deck on the channel during this format. But it's a bit tricky with this form in particular because the tier 0 status of it does make it hard to sort of show off other decks doing well. Because frankly, the tier 0 deck is the one that's going to be doing well. But you can potentially play this if you want a different sort of level for Emergency Teleport there. Psychic Commander is another one. Level 3 Psychic Tuner, 1400 attack, 800 defense, says when a Psychic type monster you control battles, during the damage step, you can pay life points in multiples of 100, max 500 to have that monster battling, lose that much attack and defense until the end phase. So this can be very good to bring out. Just get over your opponent's things as well. And having a level 3 can be good for going to some of the trickier monsters that you wind up with. But it's not quite as good as like Mind Master and Krebens, in my opinion, because the main thing that TeleDAD decks are doing is making a level 8 with Krebens and Malicious. So if you just think about having another Psychic Monster to pair with that Malicious, Commander doesn't really do much because there aren't any level 9 Synchros in the game up to this point. So Mind Master at least can go into a level 7, but unfortunately Commander cannot really go into that. Now the nice thing about this is it can pair better with level 4 monsters because 3+4 is 7 right there. But when level 6 monsters like Go Guardian are very, very powerful, you don't really even want this for that. So it's a bit tricky to use. So it doesn't really see much play in much TeleDAD decks, but it is something that you can potentially play if you want to. Psychic Jumper is an interesting one. It's an Earth level 2 Psychic Tuner. 1 attack, 1500 defense. Says 1 per turn, you can pay 1000 life points, then target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, and 1 Psychic-type monster you control except Psychic Jumper. Switch control both the targets, and if you do, their battle positions cannot be changed this turn. So this is sort of like an interesting creature swap. However, you have to be playing a fairly extensive Psychic package to actually make use of this. So that's one of the reasons why people don't really play it above things like Krebens, right? Also, Krebens in the Dark, so paired with the Lure of Darkness if you need it for that. So overall, Psychic Jumper is not really the best, but it is something you could play if you want to play a more devoted Psychic deck. Next up, for just other level 3 or lower Psychics that are not necessarily tuners, we've got Dr. Cranium, the level 1 Psychic, 100 attack, 100 defense. Said when this card is destroyed by balance in the graveyard, you can pay 800 life points to add 1 Psychic-type monster from your deck to your hand. It's a searcher, I guess, but frankly, it's a bit slow for the format. And speaking of slowing things down, we've also got some sort of stunny sort of Psychic monsters. Mind Protector is one of them, level 3 Psychic, 0 attack, 2200 defense. This card's controller must pay 500 life points during each of their standby phases if they cannot destroy this card. And a monster with 2000 or less attack cannot declare an attack except for Psychic-type monsters. This can sort of lock down your opponent's game plan a little bit. However, you have to be face up first to actually get use out of it. So that would imply you normal summon this thing out with 0 attack, which is kind of a bit risky, especially when your opponent can pretty easily go into Synchro monster of their own. This thing is not really that good. We've got Grapple Blocker as well, level 4 Psychic monster, 1200 attack, 2000 defense. It says when this card normal summon, you can select 1 monster opponent controls. The selected monster cannot attack or be tributed while this card remains face up on the field. And during each of your end phase, that is, pay 500 life points or destroy this card. So it's very similar to the Mind Protector here. It even down to paying 500 life points. Of course, this pays at the end, and Mind Protector plays at the beginning. But I think this card's a little bit worse because while you can't select anything, you have to normal summon this out. So it sort of falls into the same trap with Mind Protector, but at least with Mind Protector, you can potentially set it, have it weather an attack, and then be face up to stop your opponent's attacks. Whereas Grab Blocker, you have to extend into sort of a bad spot. And also you can't special summon this thing either. And it can't be summoned off of Emergency Teleport as well. So that's also kind of a downside for it. This is not really that good. But if you want other ways to potentially bring out monsters from deck, like Emergency Teleport, we've also got Overdrive Teleport, is a level 6 light Psychic-type monster. 1200 attack, 1200 defense. So this card cannot be special summoned. You can pay 2000 life points to special summon 2 level 3 Psychic-type monsters from your deck. This card effect can only be used once while this card face up on the field. So this can potentially allow you to go into a level 6 Synchro monster. So you tribute this thing out, pay 2000, and then bring out a Psychic Commander, any Mind Protector to go into level 6. So that's kind of neat. And those are actually the cards on this card's background, so they clearly intended for that to happen. But again, because they're in a level 9 Synchro monster in the format, this thing is a little bit worse. There will be more level 9s coming out in the future, so that could potentially help with this sort of card. Even a Psychic level 9 as well. But right now, this thing is just not really that good, especially because it can't be special summoned. Not the only tribute monster that the deck has, though. It also has Stormcaller, which is another level 6 wind Psychic, 23 attack, 2000 defense, so that you can put your opponent's monsters that are destroyed by battle with other Psychic-type monsters on top of their own deck, instead of sending them to the graveyard. When this card is destroyed by a card effect, this card's controller takes damage equal to its original attack. So, kind of interesting because its cost only comes with destroyed by card effect, so potentially you can just avoid the cost entirely. But it's not really that good because, one, the effect to stack the top of your opponent's deck only happens when, monsters destroyed by other Psychic-type monsters, not this one. So it's a bit awkward there. And two, it's just kind of weak compared to some of the Synchro monsters you could be going into instead. So I don't really think this thing is worth playing, but it's something that you could potentially play if you want to. Next up, we got another way to special summon out Psychic monsters from the deck. Or not from the deck, but just spell something out in general, and that's Teleport. The continuous spell says once per turn, if your opponent controls a monster, you control no monster, you can pay 800 life points to special summon 1 Psychic-type monster from your hand. So this can potentially bring out something like Stormcaller without having to tribute, but it mainly is used to set up your Synchro plays, right? It also can potentially be decent if your opponent has removal for your things. You can potentially use this multiple times per turn. Or no, you can't use multiple times per turn because 1 per turn. But let's say you bring out a monster to try and go into something and they remove it. Then you can potentially use this to bring out another monster from your hand. Kind of a niche scenario. And I think this card overall is not as good as Emergency Teleport because Emergency Teleport comes from deck. So just regular Teleport doesn't really do as much. But it's something you can consider playing if you want the extension even more. But There are also some other psychic monsters that don't really do anything related to like special summoning or extending further, but just do like good stuff, which is good for a deck to have. Destructotron is kind of a crazy psychic monster, level 4 Earth Psychic, 1600 attack, 400 defense. Says you can pay 1,000 life points, then target one set spell or trap card your opponent controls, destroy that target. And fun thing about this is not once per turn, so you can just summon this thing out, blow up your opponent's entire back row for a lot of your life points. But if you do that, it's probably worth doing. Now, this card does have a bit of a downside where during the end of the turn, if it's the only psychic monster you control, then it does destroy itself. So that can be a bit awkward. But if you're using this to clear out a lot of back row and you've got another psychic monster as well, then this thing can be pretty good for the deck. Next up, we've got a Power Injector here. This is the card featured on Teleport. It's a level 4 Psychic, 1300 attack, 1400 defense. Says 1 per turn, you can pay 600 life points to have all face-up Psychic type monsters gain 500 attack during this turn. So this is just a way to boost up your monsters, and that can be decent. You know, just having a way to get over your opponent's things with that extra attack boost can be quite nice. Next up, we got Side Station here. Continuous spell that says when a psychic type monster is normal summon, you can pay 500 life points, increase the level by 1, and its attack by 300. So the nice thing about this is that it enables you to sort of flexibly sort of adjust your synchro levels that you need to go into the best synchro at the time that you need it. And speaking of the synchros, I should probably talk about these because they are very good overall, especially for this archetype. Magical Android level 5 psychic synchro, 24 on attack, 17 defense, says 1 tuner or 1 or more non-tuner to make it. And then during each of your end phases, gain 600 life points for each psychic type monster you currently control. So it's a great way to just get back life that you probably lost going into it. But also the generic level 5 synchro at a time when there weren't really any others. So this thing does see play in just general decks because, you know, it's another option. If you do have the material to make level 5, you can go into this thing quite easily. Next up, we got Psychic Life Transfer, a level 7 Psychic Synchro. 1 tuner and 1 or more non-tuner make it. 24 attack, 2 element defense. Says 1 per turn. You can remove from play 1 Psychic type monster from your graveyard to gain 1200 life points. So again, a way to gain more life. And this will actually have other combo potential with what Psychic gets later on in its lifespan. But right now it's just sort of like removing from play something to then, you know, get some life, which is not bad. Next up, we've got Thought Ruler Archfiend, a level 8 Psychic Synchro, 27 attack, 23 defense. Says, if this card destroys a monster by balance at the graveyard, gain life points equal to that monster's original attack in the grave. And then when a spell trap card is activated that targets one psychic monster and no other cards, you can pay 1,000 life points to negate the activation if you do destroy it. And that last part of the effect is what makes this thing very important. The thing is played in a lot of decks because sometimes if you're worried that your opponent has like Phoenix Wind Blast or Compulsory Evacuation Device and you need to make a level 8, you can go into this thing instead of Stardust Dragon and basically protect itself and get in for a fair bit of damage. It can also be good if you need to regain life because again, it is generic and you can potentially use it to get back some life in a low life point scenario by attacking over your opponent's thing. So very, very good card overall. Another staple in the format. And you can play all of these cards, honestly, outside of the Psychic deck itself. Although it is kind of interesting to see why they are here in the Psychic sort of release of cards, because it does pair very well with the deck itself. Moving on to the last two main deck Psychic monsters, we got Psychic Snail, level 4, 19 attack. Psychic monster that lets you pay 800 life points, selects one other face-up Psychic monster you control. That monster can attack twice during each battle phase, and then this card cannot attack the turn you activate this effect. So that is very nice. You can potentially use it on a synchro monster like Thought Ruler, get a bunch of life points back, and also just get more attacks in. And Telekinetic Shocker is the last of these, and 1700 attack, 200 defense. So if a Psychic type monster on the field will be destroyed, you can pay 500 life points and destroy this card instead. So if you have Telekinetic Shocker and also a Thought Ruler Archfiend, you're really well insulated because Telekinetic Shocker can basically be like a pseudo Stardust Dragon, and Thought Ruler Archfiend can stop everything else. So that's kind of nice. Now, if you are a bit worried about the life point cost, there are also other ways to mitigate that. Telekinetic Charging Cell is one of them. A quick spell that is that lets you equip only to a psychic monster, and then you do not have to pay life points to activate its effects. When the equipped monster is destroyed and this card is sent to the graveyard, you pay 1,000 life points to return this card to your hand. So that can be very, very nice. You can also use this, equip it to a Thought Ruler Archfiend, and basically have a monster that is kind of immune to most things, and if it's destroyed, which is like the one thing that it might not be immune to, then you can just add this back to hand and use it on something else. So that's kind of nice. It actually had Thought Ruler Archfiend on the artwork, so they clearly wanted you to use it with that. But you can just use this on anything, honestly. Like equipping to a Destructotron is very nice, just free back row removal, so that's kind of cool as well. But yeah, this thing is pretty decent if you're playing a fully all-in Psychic deck. But I think a lot of decks won't necessarily play it because generally it didn't really have the most value for you. It's kind of like a win more card, honestly. But if you're playing the Psychic deck, you're generally not going to wind up in situations unless you're like playing it badly, or you're just in a really, really bad spot where like you want this over something else. So next up, we've got Telepathic Power. This is one of the better psychic support spell traps. This is a normal trap that says when a psychic type monster you control is destroyed by battle with an opponent's attack monster, target the opponent's monster, destroy that target. If you do, gain life points equal to the destroyed monster attack on the field. So this is a good way to both, destroy your opponent's stuff and also just gain life, which is very, very nice. Psychic Rejuvenation is another way to do that. It's a normal trap that says gain 1,000 life points for each face-up psychic type monster you control. This is sort of similar to the effect of Magical Android, which is why Magical Android is pictured on the card art. And that can be pretty good, just gaining back a ton of life in a very short period of time. But kind of like with Telekinetic Power Cell, I think it's not really worth playing in a devoted psychic deck because, sure, it gains you life points, but if you're managing the deck well, you're probably not going to wind up in a spot where you actually need these things to actually enable your plays. Also, it sort of conflicts with a lot of other cards that don't necessarily want psychic monsters on the field, or will just remove them from your field. Scion Pulse is one of them. It's a normal spell that says tribute one psychic type monster, return all cards in your opponent's hand to the deck, then they draw 3 cards. This thing, in my opinion, is not really the best. You compare it with that one monster that was on the limited list for such a long time, which is Protector of the Sanctuary, I think, where you do this and then they basically can't draw. So, they'll have no hand at all, but that's kind of a convoluted combo, so it's not really worth going for. Mind Over Matter is probably the better card that removes from your field. This is a counter trap that when a monster would be normal or spell summoned, or a spell trap card is activated, you get tribute 1 psychic type monster, negate the summon or activation if you do destroy that card. So they're basically Solemn Judgment for a deck that can't really play Solemn Judgment because it's going to be losing a lot of life after it does the Solemn Judgment activation. So yeah, it makes sense why this thing is printed for this deck. But you do have some other cards that do want Psychic Monster to be on field, like Psychic Kinesis, the normal spell that says if you control a Psychic type monster, target 1 card on the field, destroy it, and if you do, take 1,000 damage. So very good sort of generic removal for the deck, although there are just better removal cards out there. We got Psychic Overload as a way to sort of recycle your deck a bit, kind of like Pot of Avarice. It says target 3 Psychic type monsters in your graveyard, shuffle all 3 into the deck, then draw 2 cards. So it's Pot of Avarice is a trap card that requires less things to be engraved, but honestly, Pot of Avarice is probably a little bit better because it's a little bit more generic. If you're going all in on a Psychic deck, this thing can be pretty good. And last, we got Psychic Trigger, the normal trap that says activate only while your life points are lower than your opponent. Select 2 Psychic type monsters in your graveyard, remove them from play, and draw 2 cards. So this can kind of conflict with Psychic Overload, but you're basically doing something very similar where you're drawing 2 cards in addition to this. So it's just kind of interesting that different parts of the strategy do conflict, but it does enable you to build the deck the way that you want to build it, I guess. But I think building this as its own strategy is not really the best thing in the world. I think the main thing that you want to be doing is just using it as an engine in other decks. But, I probably will be featuring a video with this style deck. Maybe not, but it's definitely something to play around with if you want to. The other majorly supported types in these sets were plants and zombies, which is, quite a coincidence because there was a very popular mobile game around that time known as Plants vs. Zombies. Maybe that's actually why they went for this, but either way, zombies and plants both get a lot of support. Zombies mainly from the Zombie World Structure deck that came out around this time, and plants from Crossroads of Chaos, which had a lot of plant support, which is kind of interesting for a type of card that really never really received much good support up until this point, besides like Lone Fairy Blossom and Gigaplant out of Phantom Darkness. And trust me, those cards are very, very useful for a plant deck. But now they have some better stuff to go into, which is very, very good for plants. They get quite a glow up. And zombies have been good for quite some time, but they receive some very powerful new cards that really put the deck a little bit over the edge in a lot of ways. So let's go over the zombies first. Zombies have one of the best tuners in the game that is a generic tuner. You can play this in any deck, and most decks do play it as Plague Spreader Zombie, level 2 zombie tuner, for an attack, tuner, defense, with the effect that if this card is in your graveyard, you can place 1 card from your hand on the top of the deck, suppose summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. So this is very, very good because it enables synchro climbing. So what you can do is if you synchro summon with this thing, and that's how it gets engraved, you can then bring it back to then synchro summon into another monster on top of that, which can be very, very good. It can also, funnily enough, pair with some of the other things that it goes into, because oftentimes your opponent will also be playing Plague Spreader Zombie. So if you go into something like Doomkaiser Dragon, which is another synchro that needs a specific tuner, namely Plague Spreader Zombie, and one or more non-tuner monsters, the level 6, And then when this card is supposed to summon, you can target one zombie monster in your opponent's graveyard. It's supposed to summon that target to your field in attack position, but destroy it when this card leaves the field. So if you bring back a Plague Spirit zombie that your opponent has, you can then go into level 8 quite easily. So it can make for some interesting synchro climbs. You can also pair with something like Zombie World, which is another support card for the deck. That is a field spell that says all monsters on the field and in the graveyards become zombie monsters. So this will turn everything that your opponent controls and that's in your graveyard into zombies that you can then bring back with Doom Kaiser or Doom Caliber. Or Doom Kaiser, yeah. I'm thinking of the Knight. But, and then neither player can tribute summon monsters except for zombie monsters, which can come up against certain decks, but most decks are not tribute summoning here, so it won't come up all too often, but it is an interesting card overall, and it does pair very well with the Doom Kaiser. You can also go into Revive King Hades, which is a level 6 zombie, made with Plague Spreader and one or more non-tuner zombie monsters, just like Doom Kaiser here. And this allows you to negate the effect of effect monsters destroyed by battle with zombie monsters you control, which can be very good if you're playing a zombie deck. So it's just another option that you can go into here. If you don't want to go into something like Goyo and you're playing a zombie deck, you can go into this or Doom Kaiser, and both of which are pretty good. Now, if you want to get like sort of infinite uses of Plague Spreader, you can also pair it with Imperial Iron Wall, which prevents your opponent from banishing cards. This can also be used to stop things like DD Crow from actually being able to banish a Plague Spreader that you're trying to use the effect on. So that can be very nice as well. However, it does have some anti-synergy with the other really, really good zombie monster that came out in this format, which is Mizuki, which is a level 4 Earth Zombie, 1700 attack, 800 defense. It says you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one zombie monster in your graveyard, special summon that target. Now, because this thing is very good in zombie decks, and because it can allow you to extend with Plague Spreader even further, generally it's played over Imperial Iron Wall, especially because zombie decks often play Burial from the Different Dimension, which allows you to return banished monsters to your graveyard. So you don't really worry too much about this, but I'd say the Imperial Iron Wall is only really good if you're trying to stop Crow exactly. And there are other ways to do that, I think. So yeah, generally you want to play Mizuki over Imperial Iron Wall, but it could be a side deck card as well if you want to. Also, there are some other ways to extend with your zombie plays. Beast of the Pharaoh is a level 3 zombie that if it's sent to the graveyard for a Synchros summon, you can target one level 4 lower zombie monster in your graveyard and special summon that target. So there's a lot to extend further as well. But it's a bit more niche and situational, especially because generally you want to be climbing into a level 6 into a level 8 rather than climbing into a level 5 into a level 7. So it's not really as good, but it can come up. Next up, we've got a bunch of cards to actually pair with Zombie World, which were all in the Zombie World structure deck, which makes sense. Paladin of the Curse of Dragon, level 4 zombie, 90 attack, 1200 defense. Says one per turn, you can target one level 4 or lower zombie monster in your opponent's graveyard that was destroyed by battle, special summon that target. This can also work if you attack over a Plague Spreader zombie your opponent controls, and then you get it to your side of the field, so it's kind of nice, but that very rarely will happen. Because oftentimes you want to be like pitching the Plague Spreader zombie to like discard effects or things like that, not really committing it to field. So this card doesn't really come up that often unless you have Zombie World exactly, but if you have Zombie World, it's a pretty good card for that. It also is a light monster, so you can pair it with like Honest and stuff. I know people have been tinkering with sort of light zombie builds because there's another card, level Mech Goku N, which is another light zombie, 2400 attack, 1400 defense, that you're able to bring out without tributing, even though it's level 6. And then once per turn during the end phase, if it's summoned this way, you send it to the graveyard and then take damage equal to the original attack in the graveyard. But that only happens if you don't control another zombie. So, if you don't control another zombie, it can happen. But if you do, then it doesn't. And I believe that this is part of the effect. So I believe that if you have skill drain up, you will still be able to stop that from happening as well. So I could be wrong about that, but as far as I know, that's how it works. If you want to bring out other things from your opponent's graveyard, though, we got Red-Eyed Zombie Dragon, level 7 dark monster that you contribute summon this card in attack position by tributing one zombie monster. And then when this card destroys a zombie monster by battle into the graveyard, you can special summon that zombie monster. Now, you can also bring this out off of some Red-Eye support that we'll get to later. But generally, this is just, you'd bring it out in a zombie deck. You can bring it back with like Book of Life or something like that, or you can just summon it out normally over a zombie monster that you control. And this thing can be decent because you just get to bring back your opponent's zombies, just like with Paladin and Curse Dragon. And also you get to do it right away, as opposed to Paladin and Curse Dragon, which you have to basically do after the battle phase. But I think it's just a little bit more trouble than it's worth, honestly. But that's just my opinion on it, and people could definitely differ in that. Next up, we got Ever-Living Underworld Cannon, where if you're special summoning a bunch of zombies from the graveyard, then this thing can be good for that, because it basically deals 800 damage to your opponent each time you do it. So if you summon 10 times, then you basically win the game, right? I don't think it's the best thing in the world, because like generally it's kind of like the Synchro Zone that I mentioned earlier, where like if you are bringing out a lot of things, like you don't necessarily need to be burning, right? Burning is just sort of like hat on a hat, right? Like where you want your special summons to be more impactful than just playing into a card that burns, and you want your cards to be more impactful than just burning your opponent. Now, there might be some like crazy combo that you can do with Everliving Underworld Cannon that's very consistent, that like basically lets your opponent, like lets it burn out your opponent because you can just get 10 summons very easily. But frankly, this thing is not really that good. Next up, we've got Trap of the Imperial Tomb, which I think is actually potentially worse than Everliving Underworld Cannon. And this says that when a zombie monster or monster is special summoned from your opponent's graveyard to your field, target 2 cards in the field and destroy them. So if this was just from your graveyard, maybe it would be a bit better, but the fact that it has to come from your opponent's graveyard, so you kind of need to have the zombie world, plus the Paladin, plus the Red Eyes, or plus the Doom Kaiser, it just makes it a little bit worse and very, very situational. So I don't really think this thing is that good. Next up, for another zombie monster, we got Zombie Mammoth, level 4 Earth, 1900 attack, 0 defense. So destroy this card if you do not have a zombie type monster in your graveyard, and then when this face of card is destroyed, inflict damage to its controller equal to the original attack. So the only really situation you'd use this is if you're creature swapping it to your opponent or she spying it to your opponent to deal a bit of burn damage there. And to be fair, that's like, that's a decent amount of damage. Actually, I don't know if it would still burn your opponent. It might burn you because when it's destroyed in the graveyard, you are the one controlling it there. So, or that might be in your possession. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments below how this thing actually works. But either way, the thing is bad. The thing is not very good. Again, like, unless you want to make the identity of your deck completely burn, this thing's not good. If you want a nice air monster that doesn't potentially destroy itself, you got Paladin, Cursed Dragon. So this thing's just bad. Lastly, for the zombie monsters that I want to talk about here, we got Goka the Pyre of Malice, fire zombie, level 6, 22 attack, 900 defense. Doesn't really pair too much with the other zombie support here, but it is a zombie, so I figured to talk about it. It says if you control a fire monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. And when you do, target one fire monster you control, destroy that target. And then during each of your standby phases, special summon one fireball token, which is just a 100 attack, 100 defense pyro monster in defense position. And then you contribute one other fire monster, and this card gains 500 attack until the end phase. So a lot going on there, kind of more for fire decks than for zombie decks. But either way, I don't really think it's the best thing in the world. Because it's just like there are other better cards that you can special summon out instead, and fire monsters are not really that good in this format. Yes, Doom Kaiser is fire. Yes, another synchro monster that we're going to be talking about very, very soon is a fire. But most fire monsters are not worth playing, and so it's kind of hard to justify actually putting this into a deck. But those are the zombies. Let's talk about their opponents, the plants, because I think plants actually get a lot of very interesting things. Of course, part of what makes plants so good is because Lone Fire Blossom is legal in the format, so it's at 3 copies as well, so you can just go into things like Titanial, Princess of Camellias, which is a very, very strong plant monster. It's kind of like their boss monster on top of the synchro monster that they have already. It's a level 8, plant 2000 attack, 2600 defense. When a card or effect is activated, the target's a card in the field. Quick effect, you contribute one face of plant monster and negate the activation if you do to destroy it. So this is sort of similar to Thought Ruler Archfiend, except it's a card you play in the main deck, and it can kind of be made with just one card, right? You just bring out Lone Fire, go into this thing immediately, and there it is. Now, I will say, unlike Thought Ruler, which you can just keep paying 1,000 life points indefinitely to use, this thing is a bit trickier because you have to manage the monster that you have on field to actually get the most value off of it. And as I mentioned in the limited section of the video, there's no Dandelion in this format, so it doesn't give you free plant monsters on field to actually use as fodder. There are some other tools to get plant monsters on the field that could potentially come up with this thing. But overall, I think that this thing, it's still very good, even if you can't really get a ton of plants on your field. Even just having 1 or 2 can just be very, very strong. And if you're playing a plant deck, you likely will have a couple on the field. And just getting this in grave as well is also pretty good for you because you've got many ways to bring back plants from grave, which we'll talk about as well. But before we talk about those, I want to talk about some of the other big plants that you have around. Botanical Lion is a pretty big one. You got level 4 Earth, plant, 1600 attack, 2000 defense, and it gains 300 attack for each plant type monster you control. So if you summon this thing out and it's on its own, then it's 900 attack. But if you have a full board of plant monsters, then that is 3100 attack, which is a lot of attack there. But control this face of card on the field cannot switch as well, which doesn't come up all too often, but for the time when it does come up, it's very nice to have. Next up, we've got Gigantic Cephalotus, the level 4 Earth plant, 1850 attack, 200 defense, and it says this card gains 200 attack each time a plant monster is sent from the field to the graveyard. So this can potentially be pretty good, although I will say some of the other cards that spam out plant monsters on the field spam out plant tokens. So it won't pair with those because that's to be sent to the graveyard to actually boost this thing's attack. But I think this thing can be decent, just getting up to a pretty high amount of attack, although Botanical Line will get to more most often. Next up, we got Botanical Girl. This isn't a big guy, but it's sort of a searcher for other things. This is a 1300 attack, 1100 defense point plant monster. And when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add one plant type monster with 1,000 or less defense from your deck to your hand. So that's one advantage that Stuff Lotus has over Botanical Line, that you can search it out more easily. But frankly, you're probably searching out other plants, things like Nettles or Copy Plant, which are tuners to potentially allow you to do other plays. Although I think in general, Botanical Girl does not really see much play because it's a bit slow. But if you do search out Nettles or Copy Plant, that can be decent. Nettles is a level 2 tuner, Earth. 1200 attack, 400 defense. If this face-up card will be destroyed, you can destroy one face-up plant type monster you control instead. So it can sort of stick around, kind of like Krebens or Dark Resonator, but it's a bit more hoops to jump through to actually do that. And if you have another plant monster on field with this thing, why are you not Synchros something into something, right? So that effect doesn't really come up that often, but it's good to know about, I guess. And we've also got Copy Plant here with level 1 plant tuner, 0 attack, 0 defense. Then once per turn, you can target one other plant type monster on the field that has a level. This card level becomes that monster's current level until the end of this turn. So this can allow you to do interesting synchro plays that you wouldn't be able to access otherwise, even though its attack and defense are not really that high. And if you want to bring these up very easily, you've got Seed of Deception, a quick play spell that lets you spell summon one level 2 or lower plant type monster from your hand. So this can mean that you search them out off Botanical Girl, spell summon them out with Seed of Deception, and then you go into a Synchro monster. But you might be wondering, what Synchro monster do plants have? And I will say the biggest one is actually one that's also a generic Synchro monster that pretty much every deck plays in the extra deck just to have as a last resort. It's Black Rose Dragon. Level 7 Fire Dragon, 2400 attack, 1800 defense, made with one tuner and one or more non-tuner. And when this card Synchro summoned, you can destroy all cards on the field. So I did a board wipe. It's a bigger board wipe than Dark Hole, bigger board wipe than Heavy Storm. It's both combined. And then once per turn, you can banish one plant monster from your graveyard, then target one defensive monster your opponent controls. Change that target to face-up attack position. If you do, its attack becomes 0 until the end of this turn. So this thing is especially good in plant decks, but it's good in every deck because of the board nuke. Because that is just very, very powerful. If you can have a way to go into a level 7 pretty consistently, then it can be very good just blowing up the board. But if you have plant monsters on top of that, it's very good at cracking your opponent's defensive maneuvers because you get to basically attack into a 0 attack point monster if they're trying to set things up in defense. So this thing is very, very good. The second effect doesn't really come up that often in this format, but it can come up if you're playing a plant deck, so it's good to know about. Next up, we got Queen of Thorns, which is a bit more underwhelming compared to Black Rose Dragon, but to be fair, most Synchro monsters are compared to Black Rose Dragon. A level 6 plant Synchro made with one tuner and one or more non-tuner plant type monsters, and says each player must pay 1,000 life points for each monster normal summoned or special summoned from their hand except for plant type monsters. So it's going to be good to sort of put your opponent into a lockdown situation, especially if you just got plant monster that you can just bring up more easily. But frankly, it doesn't really come up that often. And most decks can't really play it. If you're playing a deck with like Mystic Tomato, maybe you play it. But otherwise, you kind of have to just play it in a plant-based deck. And again, there are probably other level 6s that you can go to that are a little bit better, like Go Guardian. So not really worth playing that much, but it is good to know about if you're playing a plant deck especially. Let's get into one of the other more powerful cards that plants got in this format, which is Miracle Fertilizer. There's like a continuous spell that says one per turn. You can target one plant monster in your graveyard, special summon that target. You don't normal summon this set. The turn you still summon with this effect, even if this card leaves the field. And then if a monster special summoned by this effect leaves the field, destroy this card. Now, it is important to note that that does not work in the reverse. If this card leaves the field, the monster you're supposed to summon off of it do not necessarily leave the field. So that is pretty good to know. And also, this thing can be used for like every turn, right? If you've got a pretty stacked graveyard of plant monsters, you can just keep bringing back things with the Miracle Fertilizer. So that is a really, really good card that can spiral out of control very, very quickly, especially because you can go into Titanium from your grave. You can also just bring back a Lone Fire, tribute that off, go into Titanium from deck as well. So, like, this thing is very good. And it should see play in most plant decks. And, of course, in later formats like Edison, the value of this card is just getting more and more valuable. Like, people are really cracking, like, crazy combos to do with plant decks, partially because of this card. But you can't really do that as much in this format because you don't have access to things like Hidden Armory. But it's still very, very good for plant decks there. Plant Food Chain is another way to spell summon plants from the grave. It's a normal trap that says target one plant type monster you control. Equip this card to that target. Gain 500 attack. If this card is destroyed by a card effect while equipped, you can target one plant monster in your grave, special summon that target. So it can give you a bit of an attack boost, which is nice. And if your opponent has to clear it, then it's destroyed. And you get back at plant. So that's kind of nice as well. You can also sort of use this Similarly to Blast with Chain, back when that was used in different like DM era formats in like Gearfried, where your opponent uses a spell trap remover on this thing, and then you potentially chain this to it, and then this thing get popped, and you get back a monster. So that's kind of neat. I will say though that this is a lot less good than Miracle Fertilizer. It's still kind of cool, and it is sort of an equip card that it bridges the gap between Miracle Fertilizer and the next card I want to talk about with Mark of the Rose, because it's a equip card that also revives something, and Mark of the Rose is an equip card. Now, Mark of the Rose actually sort of has some anti-synergy with Plant Food Chain and Miracle Fertilizer, where it removes from play a card from your graveyard. You won't be able to bring that back from Miracle Fertilizer, but it's just one card that you're getting rid of, and you're getting a very good upside. So this is an equip spell that says, activate this card by banishing one plant type monster from your graveyard, then target one phase of monster your opponent controls, equip this card to it, take control of the equipped monster, and then once per turn during your end phase, negate this card's effect until your next standby phase. So the way this works, you can control a monster for your turn, and then on your opponent's turn, it goes back to them, basically. Now, generally, you're just using this to set yourself up in a really, really good spot, potentially going for synchro play, potentially just, running down your opponent in a way they can't deal with. But this thing is really, really good. Gets even better in later formats when you have more ways to search it out. So, yeah, this thing's cracked. I'm not really sure what a plant deck will look like in this format. I'll probably try and tinker around with it, because I think that just going into Titanial very easily is pretty good. But it might be different from some of the dominant plant decks in like Edison format, for instance. Next up, we got Polynosis, the counter trap that says when a monster or monsters would be a normal summon or spell summon, or a spell trap is activated, tribute one plant monster, negate the spell summon or activation, and if you do, destroy that card. So you'll notice a bit of a trend with a lot of the support for these types, where it's very similar. I mean, this is very similar to Mind Over Matter for Psychics, and this is very, very cool. And it also pairs with the sort of idea of like tripping your plants that Titanial also has. So it's kind of neat for that reason as well. Now, I don't think most plant decks will play this. It is very strong, but it also is situational. And Solemn Judgment is a very good card, and plants, I think, can just play that instead. But still, this is kind of a neat card to include if you want to. And you might be wondering how to get a bunch of plants on field. And I think the main way that you're intended to do it is with Black Garden. There's a field spell. It's very, very interesting. It says if a monster normal summon or spell summon face up, except by the effect of Black Garden, have its attack, then the controller of that monster spell summons one Rose token, which is an 800 attack, 800 defense point plant, to their opponent's field in attack position. And you can target one monster in your graveyard with attack equal to the total attack of all plant monsters on the field. Destroy this card and as many plant monsters on the field as possible. Then, if you destroyed all of them, spell summon that targeted monster. So a lot going on there. The big thing is that it has the attack of monsters that are normal summoned or spell summoned out, and also makes plant tokens on the opposite side of the field from where those monsters came out. The final part of the effect can come up, and when it does come up, it's pretty good, because you're getting out a plant monster that will not have its attack halved, and you potentially wiped out your opponent's board of like their plant tokens. But it's a bit harder to finagle there, so it generally doesn't come up as often. Now, this thing is used in a variety of decks. People have been trying to play around with this a lot, because this thing is a very unique card. And there are also some other plant monsters in this set that do sort of do similar things, where like they summon tokens to your opponent's side of the field. So if this thing's up, then you get a token to then use yourself, which is kind of neat. So let's go through those now. I don't think the strategy of having this thing up and then using the monsters that summon a token to your opponent's side of the field are that good, but it's something you can play. So it's kind of neat, different direction that you can go with the plant deck if you want to. So first we need this Cactus Fighter to the level 4 Earth Plant, 90 attack, 400 defense, that if this card is destroyed the opponent's monster by battle, supposed to summon one Needle token, which has 500 attack and 500 defense to your opponent's side of the field in defense position. So if you attack over your opponent's thing, you can then use Cactus Fighter's effect to give them a token, which will then trigger your Black Garden, which will then get you a token, which can attack over their token. So giving you free bodies, kind of. But I don't really think that's necessary in a deck that is playing Black Garden, because Black Garden will give you free bodies just naturally as your opponent plays. So I don't really think this is that good with Black Garden, but it is something that's kind of interesting there. Next up, we got Horsey Tail. It's a level 2 plant monster, 400 attack, 500 defense. So when this card is destroyed by battle, the graveyard, spell summon one Horsey Tail token, with 0 attack, 0 defense point plant monster to your opponent's side of the field in defense position. When this token is destroyed by battle with a plant type monster, its controller sends one card from their hand to the graveyard. So this is a way to just get your opponent to discard a card. You also get a plant with the Black Garden there. So it's something you can do in that way, but like it's just sort of convoluted, a bunch of hoops to jump through. And since it has to be destroyed by battle, your opponent will probably have a pretty good monster on their side of the field anyways. So it's just a bit tough to actually make work there. Next up, we got Wall of Ivy, which is similar to Horsey Tail, where like it's generally going to be attacked over by your opponent's stuff. and then get its effect, because the flip monster, 300 attack, 1200 defense, it's a special summon 1 IV token, which also has 0 attack into defense, into plant, in defensive position to your opponent's side of the field. When this token is destroyed, its controller takes 300 damage. So, you know, this is sort of giving your opponent a bit of burn, which is kind of neat. But at the same time, you're kind of using it like Horse's Tail, where you're using it very passively. And so I don't really think it's that good in that regard. And also, as a note, you know, your opponent can use these tokens to synchro summon, which is often what they will be doing. So it's giving your opponent free material to actually use for that if you can't clear that stuff on your own. Next up, we got Seed of Flame, the level 3 fire. When this card you control is destroyed by a card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can target one level 4 or lower plant type monster in your graveyard except Seed of Flame. Special summon that target, and if you do, special summon 1 seed token to your opponent's side of the field in defense position. That also has 0 attack or defense. And since this token cannot be tributed for a tribute summon, so at least your opponent can't use it for that, but they can still use it for a synchro summon. So I think it's not really that good in that regard. But being able to special summon a plant monster is pretty good, but it has to be level 4 or lower, so it's not something like Titanial, right? But you can bring back like a Lone Fire, I guess, and do that sort of stuff. But it's just very, very situational. I don't think this thing is the best. But I guess if you're like bringing this thing back, then I guess it could give you like more insulation for like Mirror Force, because like you attack in with it, they Mirror Force, you know, you bring back a plant, they get a token, but you attack it for the token. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Honestly, all these cards are kind of weird. I don't really think they pair that well with the rest of the deck, but they are kind of interesting things that you can take the deck into. And there are other cards that you can play that sort of give you benefit on top of that. Fragrance Storm is one of them. There's a normal spell that says target 1 plant type monster on the field. Destroy that target, and if you do, draw 1 card. Then if that card is a plant monster, you reveal it, draw 1 more card. So if you give your opponent a plant token, go for Fragrance Storm, pop it, draw some cards. That's pretty decent. You also pair them with World Tree, which is a continuous spell that says each time a face of plant type monster on the field is destroyed, place 1 flower counter on this card. You can remove any number of flower counters from this card to activate the effect. 1 counter, target 1 plant type monster on the field. That target gains 4 in attack and defense until the end of its turn. 2 counters, target 1 card face up on the field, destroy that target. Or not face up on the field, just 1 card on the field, destroy that target. That's pretty good. And then 3 counters, you get to target 1 plant type monster in your graveyard, special summon that target. And as a note, you know, you can remove the 2 counters to target a plant on the field, which will then destroy it and then add a counter. You wouldn't really want to do that, because then you can't go in, like, it would just add a counter back, but it doesn't like set you up for like going infinite or anything. So I don't really think that's worth doing. But this thing could potentially come up in interesting decks, and having a bunch of counters from giving your opponent a bunch of plant tokens that you then destroy could be an interesting thing you do with this. I don't really see the vision though. I feel like this setting this up and like using it and like going through all the different effects can be like cool, but like what are you ending on? What are you setting up? So I don't know. This is a card that maybe has some potential, but I just don't see the potential, and it would really take someone really cooking something up with this to actually make it work. Next up, we got Bamboo Scrap. That's a normal trap. That's a tribute 1 plant type monster. Special summon 2 plant tokens to your opponent's side of the field and defense. So another way to give your opponent tokens. Again, I don't really think it's worth it, but it can come up, I guess. Next up, we got Cursed Fig, the level 1 plant. 200 attack, 200 defense. So when this card is destroyed by balance into the graveyard, target 2 set spell or trap cards on the field. When this card is in the graveyard, those set cards cannot be activated. So it kind of pairs poorly with the plant deck, which often has ways to get their monsters out of the graveyard. Either by Mark of the Rose banishing or by bringing back like Miracle Fertilizer and stuff. And also just it's using its effect for like a Jing Jang Hu that is more situational. So frankly, this thing, if you want to play this sort of effect, just play Jing Jang Hu. It's a bit better. But I think it's something that you can play if you want to. And lastly, we got Mushroom Man here. This is a normal plant monster that came out in something. I think it was a promo card, but I just figured I'd feature it here because it is a new plant. But we've been through a lot of types so far, and would you believe that there are actually more types to support? So let's dive into those, and then we'll dive after that into some of the archetypal support that was released in these sets. Seems like Konami was really trying to support some out there types, because Fish was also a type that received support for whatever reason. Namely, I mean, Fish Death Charge is the big one, I'd say. This is a normal trap that says tribute 1 fish monster, then target 1 card on the field, destroy that target, and if you do, draw 1 card. So that's a pretty good removal card. But to be fair, you have to tribute a fish. Now, there are some fish that you can tribute with it, like Oyster Meister is a pretty decent one, with a 1600 attack fish. And it says, if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, except when destroyed by a battle, special summon 1 Oyster token. So you can tribute this thing, 4 fish depth charge, get a token, pop a thing. That's pretty decent. You can also tribute the token as well. So that's pretty decent as well. But like, it's a bit tricky, especially when the only other fish monster that was released in the set is Cyber Shark. This is a level 5 fish, 1200 attack, 2000 defense. It says if you control a water monster, you can normal summon this card without tributing. So that's kind of neat as well. But is that worth it? I don't know. It's a bit tricky, but it's something, I guess. Oyster Miser, another interesting thing is that you can use it for synchro summons and then get the token, so that's kind of neat. But there aren't really too many ways to extend with the token in this format, so I don't really think it's worth it right now. You can also use it with super ancient deep sea coelacanth. You can tribute out over this thing to get tokens. You can potentially bring it out with coelacanth to then be able to tribute that for its effect to negate stuff. So that's kind of neat as well. So maybe there's something there, but I don't quite think the pieces are there for fish in this format just yet. Now, on the topic of fish, we might as well talk about water because there are some other water support cards here. Ice Master is one, level 8 water spellcaster, 2500 attack, 2000 defense. Says you can special summon this card from your hand by tributing 2 water monsters. And then once per turn, you can target one face-up monster on the field, place an ice counter on that target, and then tribute this card to destroy all monsters with ice counters on the field. So that's kind of neat. It's kind of a pseudo board wipe over the course of time. But unfortunately, just like ice, it moves pretty slowly. So it's not really worth playing, in my opinion. Although, if you want more ways to get ice counters on the field, we got Cold Enchanter, the level 4 water aqua, 1600 attack, 1200 defense, so you can discard one card to target one face-up monster on the field, place an ice counter on that target. This card gains 300 attack for each ice counter on the field. So you can just use this to buff itself up, or you can just use it to get a bunch of ice counters on the field to then, use Ice Master's effect to destroy everything. So that's not terrible, but frankly, these cards are not really that good. Moving on from fish to something else that's pretty scaly, we've got Evil Dragon Ananta here. This is reptile support. It's a reptile level 8. Question mark attack, question mark defense. Cannot be normal summoned or set. Must be special summoned by banishing all reptile monsters you control in your graveyard. This card attack and defense become the number of monsters banished for its special summon times 600. Then once per turn during your end phase, target one card on the field, destroy that target. So this thing does a lot of very interesting things. One, it can just be a big reptile monster that you bring out. Two, it can just pop your opponent's stuff. But it could also come on the downside of having to pop your own stuff if you've already dealt with a lot of what your opponent has. It is a cool reptile boss monster that they have now, so it's kind of neat. Do I think reptiles are playable? No, not really, but if a reptile deck does come along, maybe they want to use this thing, and it could be fun. Next up, we got Spirits. Who would have guessed Spirits would get support in this set? Very, very weird, but support they do get. Spirits are kind of a weird... they're not quite their own type. They're kind of like a super type or a subtype, or I don't know. But like, it's just kind of interesting that they are here and with more support. Now, the first monster I want to talk about is not actually a spirit technically. It is Izanagi. This is a fairy monster you can special summon by banishing a spirit monster from your hand. And when it's out, it has 2200 attack, and spirit monster you control do not have to have their effect that return to the hand activated. So this can keep spirit monster around on field. If you want that as well, we got Mirror of Yada, which is an equipped spell that does the same thing. The monster it's equipped to does not have to return to the hand. And then if it would be destroyed in battle, you destroy this card instead. That's pretty nice. We've also got some other spirit equipped cards. Orb of Yasaka is one that you equip only to a spirit monster, and when it destroys an opponent's monster by balance into the graveyard, gain life points equal to that monster's original attack. And then when the equipped monster you control is returned in the hand, and this card is sent to the graveyard, you just return this card to your hand. So it sort of mitigates the fact that your spirit monster is going to be returning to the hand, kind of like how the Gladiator Beast equipped cards mitigate the fact that they'll be returning to the deck. And Sword of Kusanagi did the same sort of thing, where it has that mitigation effect where it returns to your hand after the spirit monster returns to the hand, but does something a little bit different from Orb of Yasaka. This just basically gives your opponent, or gives your monster piercing. So that's kind of neat, but not really the best, I think. Like, I wouldn't really play Orb of Yasaka or Sword of Kusanagi if I'm playing a spirit deck. I feel like Mirror of Yada is the only one that potentially has some use cases, but if you're just playing Izanagi, that's probably better to play because this thing's extension. You get to, bring it out by banishing something, so good special summon there. If you want another thing to bring out like that, you've also got Yamato no Kami, the level 6 warrior spirit, 20 attack, 1200 defense, and it can't be normal summoner set, and it cannot be spell summoned except by removing from play one spirit monster from your graveyard, and this card returns to its owner's hand during the end phase of the turn it's special summoned, but if this card destroys the opponent's monster by battle, you can destroy one spell trap card your opponent controls. So, if you use this and the Izanagi, like, you've got monster that will not return to the hand, and also Yamato no Kami will actually pop things as well after it destroys something, so that's kind of neat. But unfortunately, I don't think that these things are consistent enough, for one, because you have to actually both hard draw them, and two, I also think like they're a bit fragile compared to some of the other boss monsters in the format, so I don't really think they're that good. There's also Izanami that was released, a level 4 fairy spirit, 1100 attack, 1800 defense. It cannot be spell summoned and return to the owner's hand during the end phase of the turn as normal summon or flip face up, just like a normal spirit. And then when this card normal summon or flip face up, you can discard one card to add one spirit monster from your graveyard to your hand. So this allows you to get back a spirit that was destroyed, so that can be kind of neat. Next up, we got Kinkabyo. This is a monster that is a bit weird in terms of the spirit monsters. Like, you wouldn't really play it in a spirit deck, because spirit monsters can't be spell summoned generally. And there isn't really that good of a use for it right now. There will be later on in the game's history, don't worry. It's a very, very cool card. But unfortunately right now it doesn't really do much, because this card has the effect when it's normal summon or flip face up, you can target one level 1 monster in your graveyard, special summon that target, but banish it when this card leaves the field. And then it does the same thing that spirit monster do, where it returns to the hand during the end phase, and it can't be special summoned. So can't really do much with this right now. Will get value later on, but right now it's just kind of a curiosity. Moving on from spirits to fairies. Fairies actually did get some good support, mainly some new boss monsters and some great ways to summon that out. Firstly, let's talk about Athena. Athena's a level 8 light fairy, 2600 attack, 800 defense. Says if another fairy monster is summoned, inflict 600 damage to your opponent. Once per turn, you can send one face-up fairy monster you control to the graveyard except for Athena, then target one fairy monster in your graveyard except Athena, special summon that target. So this is a big monster, 2600 attack, and nothing to scoff at. It deals damage to your opponent whenever fairy monsters are summoned, which can add up over time. And it can also special summon fairies from your grave, which is very, very nice. So I actually think this thing is very good for fairies as a boss monster. Not the best boss monster in the world, but it is good for fairies, which I think that if you're playing a fairy deck, this is definitely something you should consider in. We also get Splendid Venus as another boss monster, to light fairy, 2800 attack, 2400 defense. Says all non-fairy monsters lose 500 attack and defense. The activation and effects of spell trap cards activated on your field cannot be negated, which is very, very cool. It also sort of paired with the counter fairy sort of idea, where like you're negating all their stuff, but now they can't negate yours. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, this thing is pretty good as a boss monster as well. Now you might be wondering how to bring out these things, and fairies actually got a great way to do that with Valhalla, Hall of the Fallen. Continuous spell. So once per turn, you can spell summon one fairy monster from your hand. You must control no monster to activate and to resolve this effect. So this can just very easily bring out the Athena or the Splendid Venus, or any other fairy that you want to set up. And this thing is actually searchable through Hecatrice, with a level 4 fairy, 1500 attack, 1100 defense. So you can discard the card to the graveyard, add one Valhalla, Hall of the Fallen from your deck to your hand. And there's actually a variety of other fairy monsters that also activate by discarding from the hand of the graveyard. I mean, we've got the Herald of Purple and the Herald of Green Light from previous sets that you discard to negate a trap or a spell, respectively, along with another fairy. Now we've got Herald of Orange Light, which will negate monsters in a similar way. Level 2 Fairy Tuner, 300 attack, 500 defense, and says when your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can send this card and one other fairy monster from your hand to the graveyard, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. So that's a very, very good effect. It's better than purple and green, because one, like every deck plays monsters, not every deck plays a ton of spells and traps, and two, it's a tuner. So you can actually use it to go into other monsters, and that is very, very strong. Now, they also have another tuner hand trap in the form of Hanawata, the level 1 fairy. Quick effect, you can discard this card, you take no effect damage this turn. Now, this card only really would see much play in if you're up against like a burn deck, or a deck that can just burn you out all at once in a turn, which would happen eventually in the game's history. So, we'll see Smatterings in play in the future. Right now, though, I don't really think it's worth playing, but maybe a side deck card if you want to include it there. Now, you might be wondering what synchro monsters this deck can go into, since it does have 2 tuners. And the main one, I mean, it can go into all the others that I mentioned, but it can also go into Avenging Knight Parshath, the level 8 fairy, synchro monster, 2600 attack, 100 defense, made with 1 tuner and 1 or more non-tuner light monsters. And then once per turn, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, change that target's battle position. If this card attacks a defense monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. So, all told, a decent card. I don't think it's the best level 8 you can make, but it can come up in weird sort of situations. So, like, you shouldn't really be making your deck just to turbo this thing out, but, like, when it does come up, it can come up, and fairies being able to go into it is kind of nice for them. So, that's kind of neat. Next up, we got 2 light monsters, because light decks also did get just a buff in general from some of these things. Raimei is a level 3 light thunder, 14 attack, 12 defense, and when this card is destroyed by balance at the graveyard, you can add 1 level 2 or lower light monster from your deck to your hand. So that could be like the Herald of Orange Light, which is very nice. It could also be Hanawata if you want that. So a couple different cards that this thing can add. We've also got Raijin, with a level 4 Thunder, question mark attack, 1000 defense. Says all light monster you control gain 100 attack for each light monster in your graveyard. And then during your end phase, destroy 1 light monster you control. There can only be 1 face-up Raijin on the field. I don't think it's that good, frankly, because it itself is not really gaining a ton of attack. And at the same time, you're losing monsters every turn, whereas this will probably be the weakest of them. So not really worth it, in my opinion, but it's kind of interesting to have as a card you could use. but frankly, outclassed by pretty much every other light monster I've talked about so far. Next, we got Voltic Khan, level 4 light beast, 1800 attack, 1000 defense. If this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, send one card from the top of your opponent's deck to the graveyard for each light monster you control. Now that's pretty bad because a lot of decks want cards sent from their deck to the graveyard, so you're just fueling that, right? So not really worth playing in my opinion, but it is something you could play if you want to. And of course, you can play all these light monsters like with other light decks like Lightsworn. That is a deck that could potentially use like Raimei, especially, I think. Although I don't think they have like level 2 or lower light monster that they want to go into in that deck, but like you could potentially play these light monsters in them, although not all the Lightsworns are fairies. You can also play them in Thunder decks like Batteryman. We got Recycling Berries, which is a spell card that says target 2 Thunder type monsters with 15 or less attack in your graveyard. Add those targets to your hand, like we used to get back some Batterymen. We've also got Judgment of Thunder, which is a normal trap that says activate only when you summon a Thunder type monster or monsters. Destroy one card your opponent controls. So if you're playing a Thunder deck, these could be useful for you, but Batterymen are not really that good. I was going to show them off in Gladiator format, but just trying to build that deck and figuring out how to make it work was just too much trouble because the deck did not really work that well. So, good luck if you want to use these in that deck, but it's just good to know about if you ever want to build a Thunder deck in the future. Next up, we got Spellcaster, which receives Secret Village of the Spellcaster, which is actually a really cool sort of Spellcaster support card. The field spell that says if you control a Spellcaster monster, or if only you control a Spellcaster monster, that's important, your opponent cannot activate spell cards, and then if you control no Spellcaster monsters, you cannot activate spell cards. So, very interesting card. It can lock your opponent out of one of the most powerful types of cards in the game, and for that reason, it could potentially see play as sort of an anti-meta card. But you have to be playing Spellcasters for that, and Spellcasters as a whole, they're not the most cohesive strategy. They don't have the best things going for them. They did get some new Spellcasters in this format. Maiden of the Macabre is one of them, level 4 Dark. Spellcaster, 78 attack, 0 defense. So if this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, place one spell counter on it, gains 200 attack for each spell counter on it, and it sort of falls into that category of Spellcasters that actually play around with spell counters. Frequency Magician is another one, level 2 Light Tuner. 800 attack, 400 defense, and when this card normal summon, place one spell counter on it. You remove one spell counter from this card to have one face-up monster control, gain 500 attack until the end phase. You could use this to buff up a monster that you're not using the Synchro summon something also with, and then do something with that. But frankly, this thing is not really that good. Maiden of the Macabre also isn't really that good. But if you're playing a deck that really does rely a lot on spell counters, maybe use it in that. But right now, there aren't really too many decks that would actually do that. The last spellcaster I want to talk about here is Dark the Dark Charmer, level 3 spellcaster, Dark. Full effect that lets you take control of one dark monster your opponent controls while this card remains face up on the field. So it's the last, or not the last. Yeah, when did Lila come out? Lila might have already come out, but it's another addition to the Charmer sort of series of monsters here, except this takes Dark, which is pretty good because a lot of dark monsters are very good in this format. So you could potentially use this with that, but frankly, it won't come up that often, I think. It's a very, very finicky card to actually use. But speaking of cards that care about Dark, we got Dark Hunter as well. It's a Dark Fiend, 600 attack, 400 defense. Said this card's effect changes depending on the number of dark monsters in your graveyard. 1 or fewer, this card loses 400 attack. 2 to 4, this card gains 400 attack. 5 or more, you can send this card to the graveyard and destroy all face-down monsters your opponent controls. So, that last effect isn't the best to compare with some other cards in the format. But, frankly, you're mainly just using it for the 400 attack gain, I guess. But if you have 5 or more darks, then you can't use that 400 attack gain, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't really like this card that much. They're just better dark cards to play instead. But it is a Fiend, so that should bring me to Puppet Master, which is a card that plays around with Fiends. It's a level 6 Dark Fiend, 0 attack, 0 defense. Says when this card tribute summoned, pay 2,000 life points and target 2 Fiend monsters in your graveyard. Special summon those targets, but they cannot attack this turn. Potentially use this to go into some Synchro plays, but it's a bit awkward because the main Fiend Synchro or Fiend Tuner that you're using is Dark Resonator, which you can't really use with this. I think Sinister Sprocket was a Fiend. I could be wrong about that, so maybe use that with this. But either way, this thing is not really that good. Very, very high cost to actually use it. So yeah, there's better cards you play instead. Moving on to the last type I want to talk about here, we've got machines. Oh, I should mention Spellcaster would also have a Synchro monster that play around with counters. I sort of just segued too deep into the dark, but we do have Tempest Magician here, which is a pretty good one. Made with 1 tuner and 1 or more non-spellcaster or non-tuner spellcaster monsters. And 20 attack, 14 defense. When this card is Synchro summon, place 1 spell counter on it. Once per turn, you can discard any number of cards to place 1 spell counter on a monster you control. For each card you discarded, you can remove all spell counters on the field to inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each removed spell counter. This is mainly used for like FTK strategies that can do stuff like that. But it's just good if you're playing a spell counter deck in general. It is pretty good at just stacking spell counters on things that want spell counters. And so I think it's neat. So is it the best thing in the world? No, but could it see play? Maybe, and a deck devoted to it. But diving into the last type, I want to talk about machines. We got Jade Knight. This is a level 4 light machine monster, 1000 attack, 1800 defense. Says while this card is in attack position, machine monster you control with 1200 less attack cannot be destroyed by trap effects. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can add one level 4 light machine monster from your deck to your hand. And there was a level 4 light machine monster released in the same set, Healing Wave Generator, which is a machine that has 800 attack, 600 defense, and then once per turn, you can select another face-up monster you control to gain life points equal to that monster level times 100. Do I think this is the intended target to bring out off of Jade Knight? No. There are other spaceship monsters that are level 4 light machines that you're probably meant to bring out instead. I just found it funny that there's another card that fits the bill here. And this card, not really that good. Jade Knight may be better in a deck that's devoted to it and like the spaceship monsters, but I think those decks aren't really the best at this point, but maybe I'll tinker with it. I don't really think it will be that good though. Lastly, I want to talk about some trap cards that relate to types and attributes just in general. Because with the added focus on types and attributes, there were some new things that sort of interact with that in interesting ways. The selection is a counter trap that says pay 1000 life points, negate the summon of a monster that has the same type as a monster on the field, then destroy it. I think this card's a little bit too situational to see play over other better negation, but it is kind of interesting, especially given the focus on types here, that they have a way to just stop when your opponent is playing a deck that's mainly monotype. Next up, we got Goes Match, the continuous trap that says each player can only control one attribute of monster. Send all face-up monsters they control the graveyard. So this is basically Rivalry of Warlords, but for attributes. So now we have this, and we also have Rivalry to just make decks that really want to play in one type or one attribute happy, and decks that want to play in multiple a bit sad. So nextly, we've got DNA Checkup. This is probably the worst of the cards on this page, which is saying something. It's a normal trap that says select one face-down monster you control. Your opponent declares 2 attributes. Reveal the selected monster if its attribute is one of the declared attributes. Your opponent draws 2 cards. If not, you draw 2 cards. Now, you can potentially mind game your opponent with this. Like, maybe you just use it on a dark monster, and your opponent's like, oh, well, they wouldn't pick a dark monster because that's the most common and best type in the format, so I got to pick a different type. Maybe you, like, mind game your opponent with that sort of thing, or you just play, like, weird type monsters or weird attributed monsters and, like, get your opponent that way. But frankly, this thing is just too situational. Very funny card, but not really that good of a card. But that'll do it for covering the types and attribute support cards in these sets. As I mentioned, there's a lot of monsters and a lot of cards in these formats, so we still got a lot more to cover because I mentioned the types and attributes. We haven't talked about the archetypes yet, so let's dive into the archetypes now. Surprisingly enough, Duelist Genesis did not actually release any new archetypes into the game, unless you count certain cards that released that eventually became archetypes. But at the time of release, it didn't really release any new archetypes, just released types. You could argue that psychics are kind of an archetype at this point in the game's history, but they are just types. You know, technically they're slightly different from an archetype. They don't count as something new there. But Crossroad of Chaos, the next set, actually did release 2 new archetypes into the game, and they're not very good, which is a marked departure from a lot of the archetypes that were being released at the end of the GX era. But don't worry, those types do get support, so, you know, they will become stronger, but these archetypes, unfortunately, just don't have the sauce that those did. Now, I'm going to cover the a bit shorter one first, because it's very, very gimmicky, and it was just used once in the anime, so that's why it exists. Can't really even build a deck out of it, but it does exist, so I figured I'd talk about it, which is the Iron Chain archetype, which is an archetype with monsters that kind of all do different things, even though the goal of the deck is kind of do one thing, so it's kind of weird. First, we got Iron Chain Repairman, that's a level 4 Earth, 1600 attack, 1200 defense point monster. When this card destroys a monster by battle and sent to the graveyard, inflict 300 damage to your opponent. And then once per turn, you can supposed to summon 1 level 4 lower Iron Chain monster from your graveyard, except for Iron Chain Repairman. And this card cannot attack the turn you activate this effect. So, seeing this card, you might be like, okay, well, this is just meant to make synchro plays, right? And to be fair, they do have a level 3 tuner that you can bring back with it. Iron Chain Coil is a level 3 machine tuner. Once per turn, you can select 1 Iron Chain monster control to have it gain 3 in attack defense. As long as this card is face up on the field. 11 in attack, 16 in defense. You might think, okay, that's all well and good. I can see this being the basis of something, right? Because you've got a thing that revives the Iron Chain Coil. The Iron Chain Coil buffs things. It can go to a synchro play. So, like, there's a lot there, right? However, that kind of falls apart when you realize that Iron Chain Repairman is level 4, Iron Chain Coil is level 3, and the synchro monster of the archetype, Iron Chain Dragon, is a level 6. That's kind of weird. Now, I'm not saying level 7 synchros are bad. You can just make Iron Chain engine just to go into level 7 synchros, and that's fine. But it's just kind of weird that, like, the deck is so anti-synergistic with itself just right off the bat. Iron Chain Dragon is a pretty cool boss monster synchro, though it is generic 6, so you can go into it if you need a generic 6. And it's 2500 attack, 1300 defense, made with one tuner and one or more non-tuner monsters. You remove from play all Iron Chain monsters from your graveyard to have this card gain 200 attack for each remove from play card until the end phase. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, send the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck to the graveyard. And that right there is kind of the nail in the coffin for this card. You don't really want to be doing that to your opponent. And it's kind of the nail in the coffin for the archetype as well, because the archetype wants to be doing that to the opponent. That is the stated goal of the Iron Chain archetype. However, as we've seen so far, the main deck monsters don't really want to do that yet. Iron Chain Blaster doesn't really want to do that either. The level 2 Warrior, 1100 attack, 0 defense. Once per turn, you can send one Iron Chain monster you control the graveyard and inflict 800 damage to your opponent. So this is a burn card for whatever reason. And I mean, I will say there is another burn card in the deck, Paralyzing Chain, which is a continuous spell that says when a card or cards is sent from your opponent's deck to the graveyard, by a card effect, inflict 300 damage to your opponent. So there is some precedence for that. But it's like, what does this deck want to be? Does it want to be a mill deck? Does it want to be a burn deck? Like, I don't quite know. And like, it's just so weird. Iron Chain Snake is the last main deck monster, level 3 reptile, 800 attack, 1200 defense. During your main phase, you can equip this card to one face-up monster your opponent controls. That monster loses 800 attack and defense. When it's destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, its controller sends card equal to its level from the top of the deck to the graveyard. So this is another miller. It also does reduce the attack of your opponent's monster. So like, this card probably does the most for the strategy in the deck that you can do, but also conflicts with another card in the deck, which is Poison Chain, which is a continuous spell that says during the end phase of your turn, if you did not attack, you can make your opponent send cards equal to the number of face-up Iron Chain monsters you control from the top of the deck to the graveyard. So a couple things there. One, you can't attack over the monster that the Iron Chain Snake is equipped to, because then you won't be able to use Poison Chain. Two, if you actually equip Iron Chain Snake to an opponent's monster, it no longer counts as a monster. It's an equip spell now. So that means that it won't count towards the Poison Chain mills. So it's just so weird. Like, this deck it just falls apart at a very basic level. And I understand it's an anime archetype, so it doesn't have to make sense, right? It's just there for one episode of the anime and that's it. But it's just so weird that, like, it falls apart on so many levels. It's one of the worst designed archetypes in the game, I think, which I find very funny. But maybe it can see play as just, like, an engine to do, like, level 7 synchros or something. I don't know. It, like, Iron Chain Repairman is a warrior that can search off Rhoda. Maybe if you, like, you know, Future Fusion and Iron Chain Coil into the grave, or like Foolish Burial into the grave, maybe you can do stuff with that. But the actual stated purpose of the deck is just really, really bad. Moving on to the other archetype, though, this one is a bit more cohesive, even if it's not really that good. And that's Morphtronics. Morphtronics are very cool. I like Morphtronics a lot. I think they're fun. I have a lot of nostalgia for this archetype because it's just like, it's neat. And it's an anime archetype that has its stated purpose and that ties into its flavor, and it's just fun all around. So Morphtronics are basically just various devices that basically change modes, whether you switch them from attack to defense position, what have you, right? Kind of based off the Transformers, but with average appliances. The best of them, in my opinion, at this point, probably Morphtronic Radion. There's a level 4 light thunder, so it can pair with the thunder support I mentioned earlier. And it's got 1000 attack, 900 defense. And while in attack position, Morphtronic monster you control gain 800 attack. And while in defense position, Morphtronic monster you control gain 1000 defense. So this can buff all your Morphtronic monsters to pretty good heights. And so I feel like if you're playing this thing, especially if you've got multiple Radions, it can get things up pretty high. And I think that this is mainly like one of the ways you want to play the deck. There are other ways to play the deck, which we'll get into a little bit, but I think that if you want to get aggressive with the deck, Radion's the best way to do it. And Morphtronic Boombox is also great to pair with it, because it's a level 4 machine. While in attack, this card can attack twice during each battle phase, and then once per turn on defense, when a face-up Morphtronic monster you control is targeted for attacking, negate the attack. So this is also a very good card. It allows you to get very aggressive when you have an attack position, but also allows you to get very defensive when it's in defense position. Next up, we got Self-On. The way to turbo out your Morphtronics. It's a level 1 machine, 1 on attack, 1 on defense, and while in attack position, once per turn, you can roll a 6-sided die. Reveal card from the top of your deck equal to the roll, and so summon 1 level 4 or lower Morphtronic monster from among them, ignoring the summon conditions. Shuffle the rest into the deck, and then while in defense position, once per turn, you can roll a 6-sided die. Look at the cards from the top of your deck equal to the roll, then return them in the same order. So you can sort of stack the top of your deck, and then you can use the effect to bring out the cards you stacked. Or you can just stack the top of your deck to get good stuff coming up later. Or you could just use the effect, not knowing the top of your deck, just hoping to hit a Morphtronic, which if you roll a 6, you likely will. So this thing is very neat as well. I think it's one of the reasons to play the deck, because you can just turbo out things very interestingly. But I think like the way the deck's probably winning, if you do win with it, is with Radion and Boomboxing. But unfortunately, I don't think the rest of the archetype is that good at this point. Next up, we get Cameron. Cameron is probably the best of the ones remaining. Hit the level 2 machine, 800 attack, 600 defense. While in attack position, when this card is destroyed by battle, you can summon one level 4 lower Morphtronic monster from your hand or graveyard except for Cameron. And then while in defense position, Morphtronic monster on the field cannot be targeted by effects. Both of those not bad effects. They're a bit passive in my opinion. But yeah, they're fine. They can recycle things that you want to get back. But the downside is that if you want to recycle things with the attack position effect, it doesn't have to be an attack. So your opponent can just deal a bunch of damage by attacking over this. We've also got Magnan, which can sort of contribute to a bit of a stallier aspect of the deck, which the deck also has some stall burn aspects too, which is kind of weird. Like some of it's just attacking in, some of it's like burning and stalling, but that's just the different modes of the deck. Just like each of the monsters have different modes, the deck has different modes as well that you can sort of lean into one or the other. Magnan is a level 3 Thunder, and at 800 attack, 800 defense. While in attack position, if your opponent controls a face-up monster, this card can only select the highest attack monster as attack target. I don't know why that's an effect on this card. It's really bad. Doesn't really do anything for you either. While in defense position, your opponent cannot select another monster as an attack target. So this thing can be very defensive. You're never using this offensively. I'd understand if they put that offensive attack on a monster that had a good attack, but this thing does not have a good attack. It has 800 attack. Why are you doing that to this thing that already isn't going to be attacking in? Like, it's very weird. But either way, the defense position thing is what you're using it for. And if you get 2 of these in defense, your opponent can't attack anything. So that's kind of neat. Kind of like the Marauding Captain lock, but I don't really think this thing is that good because I think stalling in this format is not really that good. There are so many ways for people to break different stall locks that it's not really that good overall, in my opinion. We also get Clock in here, the level 2 Earth Machine, 600 attack, 1100 defense. While in attack position, this card gains 500 attack for each morph counter on it. What's a morph counter, you ask? Well, while in defense position, once per turn, you can place 1 morph counter on this card. You can tribute this card to inflict 1000 damage to your opponent for each morph counter on it. So, like, this is very weird. Like, you could use it as an attacker with, like, your Radion and Boombox and etc. But to do that, you have to just sit on it for so long. Because 1 morph counter on it just brings it up to 1600 attack, which is not really that good. Of course, if you've got the Radion on top of that, then like that's pretty decent because it goes up to 2400 attack. But like, it's just kind of awkward. And again, you have to just be sitting on it for so long in defense, and you're never really going to be using the defense position effect either. It's just very weird. Next up, we got Morphtronic Datatron, level 3 Fire Pyro, 1200 attack, 600 defense. And while in attack position, once per turn, you contribute 1 monster to inflict 600 damage to your opponent. While in defense position, once per turn, you can inflict 300 damage to your opponent. So this is sort of the most aggressive burn card that we've seen so far. And frankly, it's not really that good. Like Morphtronics, from all the cards I've shown you so far, they kind of want to be sitting on field. They don't want to be tributed to go to grave. And so you don't really want to use that first effect. And then the second effect does still a little damage. You don't really even want to use that either. Fun fact, though. You know, they named it Datatron because it's very clearly a lighter, and they didn't want to have a lighter in the children's card game in the West. So it's kind of funny there. But yeah, this is not like, as a kid, I thought like, oh, is that like a cell phone or something like that? But no, the cell phone to cell phone, this is just a lighter. Moving on to the non-Morphtronic monsters, we've got Gadget Driver. This is a card that you might want to play in the deck if you're playing it. A level 1 Earth Machine, 200 attack, 200 defense. So you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard and select any number of face-up Morphtronic monsters you control, change the battle position of the selected monsters, and this effect can be activated during either player's turn. So you can use this as kind of a hand trap, like maybe they're tagging into your Radion, and you switch to defense to block off something, or maybe you switch the Boombox into defense to negate an attack, or I don't know. There are uses for it. I think generally you want to use this to do it during your turn, so that way you can get off multiple effects in one turn. But it can have its cases in your opponent's turn as well, I guess. Next up, we've got some Morphtronic spell traps here. We got Morphtronic Cord, equipped spell that says equip only to a Morphtronic monster. Each time the equipped monster's battle position is changed, destroy 1 spell or trap card on the field. So this can also pair with your Gadget Driver. You can also pair that with the Morph Transition here. With a normal trap, this is activate only when a face-up Morphtronic monster controls selected attack target, negate the attack target, and also change the battle position of the selected Morphtronic monster. So this can block an attack, switch to defense. Maybe like you switch Boombox to defense, then get another negation of an attack later on in the turn. So there's stuff you can do with that. Morphtronic Monotron is a continuous trap that says when a Morphtronic monster is summoned, you can change the defense position. So that can basically allow you to choose whether you bring it out in defense or attack to get off whichever effect you want. So these are just different ways you can sort of change the battle position here. The deck also has some removal. Morphtronic Accelerator is a normal spell that says return one Morphtronic monster from your hand to the deck, destroy one card in the field, and draw one card. So that's not bad. It sort of goes net neutral because you return a card from your hand to the deck, then draw a card, so you replace the card that you return. But you're also using this thing up to then destroy an opponent's monster, or I guess card as well. So that trades, and then your hand thing sort of evens out. So just go net neutral overall. But it's still pretty good. And if you do have like a brick in hand, like you can potentially draw something else that's better. So I don't think that's the worst. And also the Morphtronics can kind of be bricks in hand. It gets them back in the deck for self-on. So I think it's neat. Next up, we got actually some non-Morphtronic cards here. We got Gadget Hauler. This is a machine, 1300 attack, level 6. Once per turn, you can send any number of Morphtronic monsters from your hand to the graveyard to have this card gain 800 attack for each. So there's another thing to get Morphtronic cards out of the hand. And 800 attack for each is not bad. Right, you send 2, and that's 2,900. That's like not terrible. So this thing can actually go up to pretty high heights. But it's just kind of weird. You have to go very negative in terms of card advantage to actually pull this thing off. And other boss monsters have better protection than this thing does. But I don't think it's terrible. It's just not really that good overall. It does get under Bottomless Trap Hole though, so that's kind of funny. In the spirit of actually buffing up your things by using Morphtronics, we've got Factory of 100 Machines, quick play spell that says remove from play all Morphtronic monsters from your graveyard. Target face-up machine monster you control gains 200 attack for each card removed until the end phase. Another way to just boost up your machines. But you're using a lot of resources, just like you did with the Gadget Hauler there. So it's a bit tricky. And the last thing to actually boost up some attack, we got Morphtronic Engine, another equip spell that is. And equip only to a level 3 Morphtronic monster. Its attack becomes double its original attack during your second standby phase. After this card activation, destroy this card and take damage equal to the original attack of the equipped monster. So you basically get to double its original attack here. Maybe if you've got like Boombox in here, get in for like 4,800 in a turn. That's crazy. But then it's very fragile because you do lose it the following turn. So that's something good to know. But that's it for the new archetypes here. Frankly, very underwhelming. These things are not that good. I don't think they'll make an impact on the game at all, but I do think that the archetypal support for older archetypes that were out are very important to talk about. So let's talk about them now. Since the last format was basically a tier 0 Gladiator Beast format, let's talk about the Gladiator Beast support first. Now, in this format, like, the deck doesn't really do as well because TeleDAD's just so dominant, but it did receive some really good support cards. So, a Quest is the first of the monsters they received. Wing Beast, 1600 attack, 1200 defense, says when this card is special summoned by the effects of a Gladiator Beast monster, target one Gladiator Beast card in your graveyard, add that target to your hand. And then it does the same thing that other Gladiator Beasts do, where in the battle phase, if it attacked or was attacked, shuffle it into the deck, bring out another Gladiator Beast. Now that is really good, especially because it says card, so it can actually bring back either a monster, like some of the other ones it gets later, or it can bring back Gladiator Beast War Chariot, which is a great counter trap for the card. It's a trap card that says when a monster effect is activated while you control the Gladiator Beast monster, negate the activation if you do destroy it. So you get to recycle this thing, which is very strong, especially in this format where monsters are very good with the Quest, and that is a very, very good control loop there. So the deck becomes less aggressive and more controlling, I'd say, in this format. Of course, it still has the multiple Geyserists, so you can go into that. But I do think that this does give you another way to play the deck. Next up, we got Rediari here. This is a Gladiator Beast level 3, Aqua, 1200 attack, 800 defense, and when it's special summoned by the effect of the Gladiator Beast monster, you can target one card in your opponent's graveyard and banish it. So this is basically a DD Crow for Gladiator Beast, which can be very good for these decks as well. You can banish things like Malicious. There's a lot of different things that you can do with it. So very good card overall. So Gladiator Beast got a lot of good support. Let's check on Lightsworn, another very powerful deck in previous formats, and Lightsworn also got some really good support. Charge the Light Brigade is a normal spell that says send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard and add one level 4 lower Lightsworn monster from your deck to your hand. So this is a great sort of rota for the deck. It also allows you to mill on top of that, so you can potentially mill a wolf or further extension. So very, very good card overall. Next up, we got Genis Lightsworn Mender. The only new Lightsworn monster that came out, but it's not really that good. This is a spellcaster, 300 attack, 2100 defense. So during the end phase, if a card was sent from the deck to the graveyard by the official Lightsworn monster, or Lightsworn card this turn, that is. So that will actually count, well, not Charge the Light Brigade, but will count other Lightsworn cards. Inflict 500 damage to your opponent, and if you do, gain 500 life points. So this can be a bit of a burn, bit of a gain life as well. But frankly, the deck doesn't really want to be doing that most of the time, so it's not really that good in my opinion. Next up, we got Lightsworn Saber. There's an equip spell that says equip only to a Lightsworn monster, gain 700 attack. When this card is sent from your deck to the graveyard, you can target one Lightsworn monster you control, equip this target or this card to that target. So there's basically a way to just get your monsters having high attack, which is kind of neat. But frankly, like, it's not really the best. You can't really use it on your turn as much because it'll just be a threat for your following turn. Which, to be fair, something like Wolf is also like that. And I guess you could use this similarly to Wolf. But, like, Wolf is another monster, which is a lot better to have than just a spell card equipped to a monster. So, I don't think this thing is that good, but maybe different decks play it to get it a little bit more aggressive. I don't know. Next up, we got Lightsworn Barrier. There's a continuous trap that says when a Lightsworn monster you control is targeted for an attack, you can send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard, then target the attacking monster and negate the attack. So this is a way to protect your monsters here. So that can be decent. I don't think it's the best thing in the world, especially because like a lot of Iceborne decks don't play traps like this because if it gets milled, it's not getting you value compared to some of your other things that are getting milled. But it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. I don't know. Not much else to say about this thing. Next, we got not a Lightsworn card technically, but a very, very good card for the deck. Needleblade Nest. This is a normal trap that says send the top 5 cards of your deck to the graveyard. This can be very good at just setting a bunch of Lightsworns, and that's very, very strong for the deck. It can also pair with other cards that want to be engraved. Things like the Whitestone of Legend, which is a new Blue Eyes support card coming out of Crossroads of Chaos, the level 1 Dragon Tuner. And if sent to the graveyard, you get to add 1 Blue Eyes by Dragon from your deck to your hand. So if you play Blue Eyes, you can potentially have a new tool for that. I don't think it's the best thing in the world because it doesn't really have much to do as a tuner. And also Blue Eyes doesn't really have much to do in this format, but it is something you can play if you want to. We also have Red Eyes Wyvern. This is a level 4 dragon, 1800 attack, 1600 defense. It says 1 per turn during your end phase. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 red-eyed monster in your graveyard. Spell summon that target. You're not normal summoner set. During this turn, you activate this effect. So this can be used on just classic Red Eyes. It can be used on Red Eyes Beat Check. It can be used on Red Eyes Zombie Dragon, which we talked about earlier. So there's a variety of different things that this can be used on. Unfortunately, none of those are really powerful enough to merit playing this thing in a deck now, like a Red Eyes Focus deck. But there may be a card coming up relatively soon that could give it a bit of a use case, which we'll get to when we cover future formats. Nextly, since we're talking about anime cards, we might as well talk about the anime cards from the last anime, which are the Hero cards. Hero did get a variety of new support cards, mainly out of some like premium packs and like promos and stuff like that. They're not really that good overall. Voltic, I think, is probably the best of them. The level 4 Light Thunder. 1000 attack, 1500 defense says when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can target one of your banished elemental hero monsters and spell summon that target. It's paired well with like Miracle Fusion, so you can potentially use it to bring back a Stratos that you banish off Miracle Fusion. But no fusion monster for elemental heroes, actually work with Stratos right now. In the future, you can potentially do that a bit better, but like right now you can't really use it for that, so you kind of have to use it for your other elemental heroes that are banished. So it's not really the best right now, but it's definitely the best of the crop because the rest of the cards here not really that good. Next, we got Elemental Hero Woodsman, which is a level 4 Earth Warrior, 1000 attack, 2000 defense. When turn during your standby phase, you can add 1 polymerization from your deck or graveyard to your hand, so you get to use this. You basically recycle polymerizations, which is very nice. And it's very similar to Ocean, which lets you add an Elemental Hero from the field or graveyard to your hand. And surprisingly enough, they actually make a fusion monster together, Elemental Hero Terra Firma. This is a level 8 Earth Warrior Fusion, 2500 attack, 2000 defense, made with Ocean and Woodsman. And it must be fusion summoned, can always be summoned by other ways. And you contribute 1 face of Elemental Hero monster. This card gains attack equal to the tribute monster attack until the end phase. Not a very good effect. Not the best stats. Not really that good overall. It does have its own specific support card, Terra Firma Gravity, which is a normal trap that says during your opponent's battle phase, if you control Elemental Hero Terra Firma, this turn all level 4 lower monsters your opponent controls that can attack a face-up Elemental Hero Terra Firma you control must attack it and cannot attack otherwise. So, I guess you bring this thing out and then all your opponent's monsters run into it, but like very, very situational. Not really that good against most decks in the format. Next, we get Elemental Hero Heat. This is a level 4 Pyro Fire monster. 1600 attack, 1200 defense. This card gains 200 attack for each Elemental Hero monster you control. So if you got a bunch of Elemental Heroes that can get pretty high, I guess. I guess it gets to like 2600 at max. But on basis like 1800, which is fine. It's just not really as good as other cards that you could be playing. We also got Elemental Hero Lady Heat. That is a level 4 Fire Pyro, 1300 attack, 1000 defense. It said during each of your end phases, inflict 200 damage to your opponent for each face of Elemental Hero monster you control. So pair these two together. That's 1000 damage every turn and 1000 attack point gain for this. Not terrible. Not really that good either. But they do have their own fusion monster, which is Elemental Hero Inferno, the level 8 Fire Pyro fusion, made with Heat and Lady Heat. 2300 attack, 600 defense, and again, it's got the Elemental Hero Fusion constraint where it must be fusion summoned, cannot be spell summoned other ways. If this card battles a water monster, this card gained 1000 attack during the damage step only. So unless you want to use like DNA transplant to make all your opponent's monsters water, thing isn't really going to get much value outside of that, so not really worth playing. But it is an interesting card here. I like the design of it. I wish it had a better effect, but unfortunately it does not. Next up, we got Elemental Hero Nops here, the level 3 Earth Plant, 600 attack, 1000 defense. Each time this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, it gains 100 attack and lose 1000 defense. While you control another face-up Elemental Hero monster, your opponent cannot target this card for an attack, and this card can attack your opponent directly. So the idea is, pokes in every turn, gets slightly stronger every turn. I guess it only gets 1000 attack points stronger because then it will have 0 defense, so it won't be able to lose anymore. I think that's how it would work. But either way, not really that good because over that course of time, you could have been just having a better card instead. But this thing can level up. It can go into a Rosebud, which is a normal spell. It's a treat 1 Elemental Hero Nop, special summon 1 Elemental Hero Poison Rose from your hand or deck. And Poison Rose cannot be normal summoned or set. Must be special summoned with Rosebud and cannot be special summoned other ways. This thing better be worth it if it's got such a tight summoning condition. It's a plant that's got 1900 attack, 2000 defense. And each time this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, it gains 200 attack and loses 200 defense. Your opponent can only target Elemental Hero Poison Rose for attacks. Not really that good, especially for all that trouble there. This thing is not a very good payoff. But I will say something interesting about all these elemental heroes here. I'm pretty sure these are the first set of elemental heroes that are not actually just warriors, right? Voltix Thunder, the Heat and Lady Hero Pyros, and then Nops and Poison Rose are both plants. I'm pretty sure that's the first elemental hero cards printed here that are not warriors. I could be wrong about that. Let me know in the comments below if I am wrong about that. But it's sort of a milestone for the deck, so that's kind of neat. Lastly, for the Heroes support here, we got Heroes Bond, the normal spell that says if there's a face-up hero monster on the field, so summon 2 level 4 or lower elemental hero monsters from your hand. And hero could be anything. It could be Destiny Hero, Evil Hero, etc. And you still get to spell summon out those elemental heroes from hand. Now, do you really want to do this? Maybe not. I guess you can spell summon out of Stratos, that's something. Or you get them on the field for like Miracle Fusion, but like, it's just a lot of effort for not much payoff in my opinion. So this thing is not really that good. But of course, we're talking about elemental heroes. We got to talk about Neos, and Neos did get a support card as well in the form of Neos Wiseman. This is a level 10 spellcaster, 3000 attack, 3000 defense, and cannot be normal summoner set. Must be special summoned from your hand by sending 1 face-up elemental hero Neos and 1 face-up Yubel you control to the graveyard. So 2 pretty hard cards to actually get on field at the same time. Cannot be destroyed by card effects, and at the end of the damage step, if this card battled an opponent's monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the monster's attack, and you gain life points equal to that monster's defense. So frankly, this card's not really that good. You need to have it in hand. It's unsurgeable, and you need to basically have access to the other monsters as well to bring it out. And then it doesn't really have protection once it's on field. So this thing, not really the best. Not the only Neos support card that came out though here. We also have Elemental Hero Divine Neos, level 12 Light Warrior Fusion, 2500 attack, 2500 defense. It must be fusion summoned using any 5 Neos, Neospace, Neospatian, or Hero monsters, including at least 1 Neos or Neospace monster, 1 Neospatian monster, and 1 Hero monster, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. Once per turn, you can banish 1 Neos, Neospace, Neospatian, or Hero monster from your graveyard, and this card gains 500 attack, and until the end phase, it also gains the banished monster's effect. So, you know, you could potentially use it to get off some powerful effects. But you think about the Neospace or Neospatian monsters that you'd be wanting to banish to get their effects, and the hero monster that you'd be wanting to banish to get their effects. There aren't really much of them. Maybe you want Voltix effect, so that way you can bring back one of the things that are banished. Maybe you want Grammel's effect to like bounce a thing, but doing that would also bounce the Divine Neos, so that's not even that good there. Maybe you want Neos Wiseman's effect? I don't know. It's kind of weird. There aren't really too many things that you'd want to take. Maybe Panther to like copy an effect of an opponent's monster, but like frankly the thing is just much too much trouble. You have to play so many things to make this actually, you know, feasible on field and actually have a chance to summon it out. And it's just too awkward, especially because you're banishing probably 5 of the monsters from the graveyard for like Miracle Fusion, right? And then you won't really have many engraved to actually use more of it. So I don't think this thing is that good, but it's something that you can play if you want to. And it's maybe a sort of Hail Mary card to go for, to have some pretty cool effects if you actually get to pull it off. Next, going through some other GX archetypes, we got Carrier Roid for the Roid archetype, which, poor Roid archetype, it really does not get much over the years, and is very sad. Doesn't really have an identity. It's just Roids. Level 4 machine, 1000 attack, 800 defense. When an opponent activates a card's effect that targets and destroys a spell or trap card or cards you control, you can discard 1 card and negate its activation and destroy the card. Not terrible, But if your opponent sees you have Carrieroid on field, they're just not going to play those effects. They're going to destroy the Carrieroid first, and then they're going to destroy your stuff. So it's not really the best. Also, I will say there are specifically cards in Roids that want to be destroyed. Like Wonder Garage is a card that wants to be destroyed. So it's like, this is sort of anti-synergistic with that. So it's like, I don't know. It's very weird. I don't think this thing is that good, but it's kind of neat that it's here, I guess. We also got Arcana Force getting a new card, Arcana Force EX, the Light Ruler. This is a level 10, I believe. Maybe level 9? Level 9, I think, yeah. Fairy, 4,000 attack, 4,000 defense. Cannot be normal summoned or set. Must be special summoned by sending 3 monsters you control to the graveyard. If this card is special summoned, toss a coin. If you get heads, when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle instead of the graveyard, you can target 1 card in your graveyard, add that card to your hand. And then tails, when a spell trap card or monster effect that targets this card activate a quick effect, this card loses exactly 1,000 attack, and you negate the activation if you do destroy it. So either of those effects, not that bad. Pretty good. You bring this thing out by sending 3 monsters you control the graveyard, so you don't need to be playing Arcana Force stuff for it. So it's kind of a neat card. I don't know. Maybe, like, it's a bit tricky because, like, unlike Destinero Plasma, for instance, it isn't really searchable. So if you're playing a boss monster that sends 3 cards from your field to the grave to bring out, you probably want to be playing Plasma. But I don't know, maybe this is something that people can experiment with. It's pretty good if you get to bring it out. And while there is some uncertainty based on the coin toss, it's kind of neat. So I don't know, not a bad card overall. Moving on to the other GX archetype. This one's actually pretty good. We got Gear Town. Gear Town field spell that says both players can normal summon ancient gear monsters for 1 less tribute. And when this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 ancient gear monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard. That second part of the effect is the important part here, because you can use this thing to bring out ancient gear Galvatron Dragon pretty freely. That's a 3,000 attack point ancient gear monster that prevents your opponent from activating spells and traps when it attacks in. And that's pretty good. Is this thing like the most meta thing in the world? Maybe not. But it is definitely an engine you can play in certain machine decks. So I think it's pretty cool. So yeah, maybe something can happen there. Also, if you want to pop it, we can use a Monarch card, adding the Monarch archetype. Kuraz the Light Monarch. This is a level 6 Light Warrior, 24 attack, 1,000 defense. Says when this card normal or special summoned, you can target up to 2 cards on the field, destroy those targets, and if you do, each player can draw 1 card for each of the cards they controlled that was destroyed by this effect. This card cannot attack during the turn it is normal or special summoned. So if you bring this out, pop your Gear Town, then I believe you can bring out the Galvatron, because I think that this destroying happens simultaneously to the drawing. I could be wrong about that, though, but I think you can use this to pop Gear Town. I think there were some Edison decks that were trying to take advantage of that. And this can just be like an advantage engine, where like you bring it out, pop some of your own stuff, draw some cards that get you into other things. So I feel like this is pretty good. So yeah, maybe there's legs on this thing in this format as well. I don't know. We'll have to find out. Lastly, I'm going to cover Goblin Decoy Squad. Goblin Decoy Squad is a level 4 Dark Warrior, 1,000 attack, 0 defense, part of the Goblin series of cards that all do the thing where they attack in and then switch to defense after they attack. And when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can draw 1 card. If this card attacks, it changes defense position at the end of the battle phase. This card battle position cannot be changed until the end of your next turn, except with a card effect. So that final part's the same as all the other Goblin things. But the first part where you get to draw a card is pretty nice. So maybe that's something you play in that deck. If you are playing that deck as a deck, I don't think it really synergizes enough to play as a deck, but it is something you could play if you want to. Lastly, I want to talk about Hand of the Six Samurai. I know I said lastly for Goblin, but this is actually the lastly for this section. And Hand is actually really good. It's for 6 Samurai. It's a level 3 Fire Warrior, 1,600 attack, 1,000 defense. And if you control another 6 Samurai monster, you tribute 1 6 Samurai monster, then target 1 card or 1 monster on the field, destroy that target. So you can tribute itself if you want to. You can tribute another monster instead. And this thing is just good removal. So it's pretty good. I don't think it makes 6 Samurai like super playable in this format, but it's good to keep in mind if you want to try building that deck. This is definitely something that you want to consider for that. But that's going to do it for all the archetypal, typal, all those different things in this format. Man, that was a long run. However, you're checking the runtime of this video, we got a little bit more because there were also just some miscellaneous cards introduced in this set and in promos and things like that. Some of which actually do end up mattering quite a bit, but all of which are interesting to talk about. So I will be going through each and every one of those in this next section, and it's going to be a bit longer than the previous section. So buckle up and enjoy. And this will close out the card pool for TeleDAD. Now, these are just the cards that I didn't really feel like I could really fit into any of the other sections of this video. They're kind of their own thing. And I think some of these are actually quite good. So them being in the section does not mean they're bad. It just means that they didn't really relate to anything else as much as the other cards did, right? But I will say, if you look at how many cards there are there, I filled up the whole main deck and also some of the side deck here. So buckle up, this is going to be a bit of a long discussion here. I tried to organize it based like loosely on cards that kind of go together, but you'll see in the end, I kind of just had to throw the remainder in there because some of them at the end didn't really go together at all. But first, let's talk about the good cards. And if you're just here for knowing what's like meta in the format or not, I commend you on making it this far into the video. But after I cover like the first 3 or 4 cards here, you can probably just, skip to the deck list at the end if you're not interested in the remainder of the cards here. I think there's some interesting cards though, so I encourage you to watch if you're just interested in like interesting cards and just weird card design. But I think that overall, all you really need to care about are Gorz and Ryo mainly, and maybe Treacherous. But these are the big ones. Gorz is huge. Gorz changed the way that people play the game. Because Gorz actually makes you have to care about how you attack directly into your opponent when they have an empty board. Gorz is a level 7 Fiend Dark Monster, 2700 attack, 2500 defense. It says when you take damage from a card in your opponent's possession, you can spell summon this card from your hand. You must control no cards to activate and to resolve this effect. When this card is spell summoned by its effect, activate the appropriate effect based on the type of damage. Battle damage, you get to special summon 1 Emissary of Darkness token, which is a light fairy, level 7. Which has attack and defense equal to the amount of battle damage you took. And if it's effect damage, you get to inflict damage to your opponent equal to the damage that you took. So this can be used either for combat or effect damage, but mainly it's used for battle damage. And this actually does shift the way that people have to attack, because normally, like, before this card existed, you just, if your opponent on an empty board, attack him whatever order you want with your monsters. Now it changed a little bit, because if you attack in with the monster with the highest attack that you control into your opponent's empty board, they drop Gorz. They get Gorz and a token that has a ton of attack that you then can't beat over. If you attack from lowest to highest, though, and your opponent drops Gorz on one of the lower attacks, you can actually beat over the token with one of your higher attack monsters. So generally, the way that people have shifted their attack patterns in this format are as if their opponent has an empty board, you attack in with the lowest attack point target first, and just keep going up and up until you finally attack him with the highest attack target, or you just save it in case you're playing around Gorz, because now there's actually reason potentially not to attack in with everything. So Gorz is very, very important. I think it's a fair card relatively, because you are sort of like playing into it if you run into it too much. And you can play around it, like, maybe not quite easily, but you can definitely play around it. So I think it's kind of like Mirror Force or Torrential Tribute, where like, you definitely get screwed over by this card, right? Especially if you're getting greedy. But if you play around it and respect it, then it won't necessarily be the worst thing in the world for you most of the time. Next up, we've got Thunder King Ryo. Thunder King Ryo is very good into a variety of decks in the metagame here. It's a light level 4 Thunder, 1900 attack, 800 defense. Says neither player can add cards from their deck to their hand except by drawing them. And then when your opponent would special summon exactly one monster, you can send this face-up card to the graveyard, negate the special summon, and if you do, destroy it. So this can stop Synchro summons, which is very, very good in this format in particular. It can also stop things like reinforcement in the army as well. It can stop Stratos. It can stop a lot of very good stuff that a lot of decks are playing. So I think Ryo is a very good card, especially if you're building an anti-meta deck. This thing is great. It also pairs with Honest, which is at 3 in this format, so helps out there as well. Yeah, this thing is just very, very good. So definitely expect to see some decks based around this in my future coverage of the format. Next up, we got Treacherous Trap Hole. This is a card that I'm including at the top of the list just because I think that it could potentially see play in decks that don't play many traps. Like if you're playing like a Lightsworn deck, maybe you got Treacherous Trap Hole, because you're generally not playing many traps in that style of deck. The normal trap that says if you have no traps in your graveyard, target 2 monsters on the field, destroy those targets. That can be very good at stopping your opponent's synchro plays or just getting aggressive with it, you know? Yeah, this thing is very good if you are playing a deck that doesn't play traps. Is it enough in this format when Stardust Dragon is so easy to access? I don't know. But it definitely is a card to consider depending on how you're building your deck. And it's not the only Trap Hole card that came out in this format. We also got Giant Trap Hole. This card's a lot worse, but it is still something you can play. It's a normal trap that says when 2 or more monsters are special summoned at the same time, destroy all monsters on the field. So this is basically Dark Hole, but its conditions are kind of weird. Like generally 2 monsters will not be summoned at the same time. So that makes it a bit awkward to use, but maybe there's something that you can find an application for it. It's just not really that good in my opinion. Next up is Book of Eclipse. This is a sort of variant of Book of Moon. It's quickly spell. It says change all face-up monsters on the field to face-down defense position. During the end phase of this turn, change as many face-down defense position monsters your opponent controls as possible to face-up defense position. Then your opponent draws cards equal to the number of monsters changed face-up by this effect. So obviously, if you use this at a wrong time, it can give your opponent a ton of cards. but it can also be very, very versatile. Kind of like Book of Moon, where Book of Moon setting down a card can be very good. This card can also be very good. It can be used to stop big damage pushes. It can be used to sit down your opponent's monsters so you can beat over them. It can be used to stop synchro plays. There's a lot of different applications for this card. I will say it probably won't too much play in this format because Book of Moon is just generally better because there's no potential upside for your opponent. But I can definitely see this being a thing that people tinker around with, right? Next up, we've got Scrap Iron Scarecrow. This is a trap card that ruled the playground just because we didn't quite understand how it worked a lot of the time. Normal trap that says when an opponent's monster declares an attack, target the attacking monster, negate the attack. Also after that, set this card face down instead of sending it to the graveyard. So this is attack negation that sticks around for quite a bit. Now, back in the day, a lot of kids thought like, oh, you just keep activating this, whenever your opponent attacks that turn. So it just stops all attacks. Doesn't quite work that way because you can't activate the trap the turn set. So if you activate this thing, then it gets set back down. You then can't activate it again that turn. So it's not quite as broken as we thought way back when. It is still pretty good at stopping attacks, though. So definitely something to consider if you want a attack stopper. This is one of the better ones in the format, in my opinion. Next up, we've got Prideful Roar. Prideful Roar is a normal trap that you activate in the damage step. It says during damage calculation, if your opponent's monster if your monster battles an opponent's monster with higher attack, pay life points equal to the difference in attack. Your monster gains attack equal to the difference plus 300 during damage calculation only. So it can allow your weaker monsters to destroy your opponent's stronger monsters. Generally, there are better cards that you can use here, though. Like Dimensional Prison is probably better. Compulse is probably better. There's a lot of cards that are probably better than this one to actually stop that sort of thing, but it is something you can play if you want to. And speaking of just ways to disrupt battle or stop battle, we also got Shield Warrior. This is basically Necro Gardener at home, which is kind of weird because Necro Gardener is still unlimited at this point, so you can just play as many as you want. But this is a level 3 Earth Warrior, 800 attack, 1600 defensive. During damage calculation, either play a turn, you can banish this card from your graveyard. Monster you control cannot be destroyed by this battle. So basically protects your monster, but Necro Gardener does that infinitely better, so just play that instead. Next up, we got Defense Draw, a normal trap that says during your opponent's turn at damage calculation, make the battle damage you take from this battle 0, and if you do, draw 1 card. So that can be kind of neat. It kind of cycled itself, honestly, while having a slight upside. But you might just want to play better cyclers like Jar of Greed and stuff that can actually be chainable to your opponent's backer removal. But I guess if you're really worried about attacks and damage and stuff, you can play this instead. Next up, we got Kunai with Chain. This is a sort of versatile card because it can both stop the attack or it can let the attack go through and just give your monster a buff to get over your opponent's monster. It's a normal trap that says activate 1 or both the effects simultaneously. When the opponent's monster declares an attack, target the attack monster, change that target to defense position, or target one face-up monster you control, equip this card to that target, gains 500 attack. So if you are in a situation where your monster has, less than 500 attack difference between your opponent's monster, you can flip this up, give it 500 attack in the damage step, and allow that monster to get over your opponent's monster. You can also use this just to switch your opponent's monster to defense and also potentially give your opponent or give your monster 500 attack as well. So it's a bit of an interesting battle stopper because it also buffs your thing. And it's an iconic card from the original Duel Monsters anime. So very cool to see it finally in the game. Is it the best? Probably not. But is it decent? Maybe. I don't know. Speaking of equipped cards, though, we actually have a couple more in the format. We got Fighting Spirit. There's an equipped spell that says the equipped monster gains 300 attack for each monster your opponent controls. If it would be destroyed by battle, you can destroy this card instead. So it protects your monster. Also, the more monster your opponent has, the better it is. So that's kind of neat. Although if your opponent has a ton of monsters and you equip this thing, you might be in a tough spot because with a lot of monsters, your opponent can likely go into a lot of different plays. So yeah, it's not the best thing in the world, in my opinion. Next up, we got Junk Barrage that does a little bit more damage. It's an equipped spell. It says when the equipped monster destroys the monster by battle instead of the graveyard, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the half the destroyed monster's attack in the graveyard. So this enables you to just get a bit more extra burn damage in. But is it the best thing in the world? Probably not. It's just sort of like, as I mentioned earlier, a hat on a hat, where if you're in a situation where you're destroying your opponent's monster by battle a lot, you don't really need the extra burn damage on top of that. Next up, we've got Omega Goggles with an equipped spell that says equip only to a monster you control once per turn. You can look at one random card in your opponent's hand, then the equipped monster cannot attack the turn you activate this effect. This card is awful. This card is one of the worst equipped cards in the game, in my opinion. Looking at a random card in the opponent's hand, doesn't actually deal with it. It lets you know about it, sure. Maybe if you got Mind Crush, you use Mind Crush on it as well. But it's just a lot of effort for not much payoff, right? And also you can't attack with whatever you equip with it, so it's just not really that good. It's kind of like the reason why Inexperienced Spy way back at the start of the game was not really good, because just knowing a card in your opponent's hand doesn't do anything to stop it. So you're just better off playing other cards that can actually deal with the threat rather than just give you awareness of the threat. Next up, we got an interesting equipped card. This is Handcuffs Dragon. Level 5 Dragon, 1800 attack, 1800 defense. I loved this thing when I first opened it up out of Duel's Genesis. Not really that good of a card, but it's fun, at least. When this card is destroyed by battle with an attacking monster your opponent controls and is sent to the graveyard, you can equip this card to that monster. The equipped monster loses 1800 attack. When it's destroyed and this card is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon this card. So it's kind of neat. It sort of forms an interesting gameplay loop where, like, if they attack into it, this equips to it, weakens that monster, then you attack over that, you get back to Handcuffs Dragon. They have to deal with it through some other means. However, in practice, where, you know, people can actually synchro summon off using the monster that this is equipped to, it's not really the best, right? So I don't think this thing is that good, especially because it does cost a tribute. So yeah, this thing not that good, but very fun card overall. I still have a special place in my heart for it, especially because it just looks so funny, you know? It's like one of the cups is like over its mouth. Like, I don't know, it's cool. I like it. Next up, we got Unstable Evolution. There's an equipped spell that says while your life point is lower than your opponent, the equipped monster's original attack becomes 2400. While your life point is higher, the equipped monster's original attack becomes 1000. So this is basically like a bootleg Megamorph, especially because Megamorph is at 1 in this format. So if you really want to play a card to boost up your thing based on what your life points are, you can play this, I guess. It also has some application, I guess, with something like Equip Shot, which is a normal trap that says activate only during the battle phase. It's like one equip card equipped to a face-up attack position monster you control. It's like one face-up attack position monster that your opponent controls. Equip that monster with the selected equip card, then conduct battle between your previously equipped monster and the selected monster. Other effects cannot be activated during this battle. So if you have Unstable Evolution and you sort of shifted the life point thing where you're using it to boost up your monster, but now it's lowering the attack for your monster, and your opponent's like, okay, now it's at 1000, I can bring out this thing, attack over it very easily, then you can potentially equip shot, equip it to the opponent, and you know, win that battle, right? Is that the best strategy? No, I would say probably not. There are other ways to win battle that are less convoluted and less situational, but it is very funny if you do it, so that's kind of neat. Next up, we've got another sort of counter to equip cards, because you could count equip shot as kind of a counter to equips in a way. It's not really, because I guess you're playing it, you're using equips, but like Overworked is definitely a hard counter to equips, which is not the only hard counter to equips, but it's kind of funny that they have them in the format. Overworked is a pretty good normal trap that says destroy each monster whose attack is higher than its original attack. That actually can come up against a variety of decks, not just equip decks, you know, and it also doesn't work actually against Unstable Evolution because that changes the original attack. But this thing is very good if your opponent's like trying to go for no DK, equipping a bunch of things to a monster, then you Overworked and just destroy it, you know. Next up, we've got Spell Shattering Arrow. This is a quick play spell that destroys as many face-up spell cards as your opponent controls as possible. And if you do, inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each. So if your opponent has a bunch of equipped spells, then this thing can just get rid of them, right? Of course, it's mainly used to get rid of other floodgates, right? Or just other continuous spells in the format. And there are some others that were introduced in these sets. Domino Effect is one of them. It's a continuous spell that says when a monster your opponent controls is destroyed in a battle inside of the graveyard, you can send one monster you control to the graveyard to destroy one monster your opponent controls. So it's a cool sort of way to just get rid of 2 of your opponent's monsters. But if you think about what this card actually does, you're destroying one of your opponent's monsters already. So it's not destroying that thing. So what it's doing is it's taking away one of your monsters and destroying one of your opponent's monsters. And it's costing 1 card to do that because it itself is a card. So you're kind of doing a 2-for-1 here. Now, if you use it over multiple turns, maybe that changes, but I don't think it actually does because you're still just going 1-for-1 on each of the times you use this effect, and you're still using 1 card to actually do that effect. So like, it's not really worth it in sort of a card economy sort of way, but it's a very funny card to think about and just have. So I like it. I don't know. I guess Off Spell is my heart for it. Is it good? No. Is it funny? Yes. We also got Power Filter, which is a bit more of an annoying card. This is a continuous spell that says neither player can special summon monsters with 1000 or less attack. If you think about what that actually hits, it doesn't really hit like all too much in terms of the metagame in this format. It's malicious, which is brutal, but honestly just malicious really. Because if you're using Emergency Teleport to bring out like Crybons or something, you don't have to worry about that. If you're playing Lightspawns and like using Lumina, you can like just pick a monster in your grave that has 1000 or more than 1000 attack, that is. If you're playing like Gladiator Beast, you don't have to go into like Murmillo, I guess. So then you can just go into like Bestiari, pop this thing before going to Murmillo later. I guess it stops like the Rescue Cat plays, but like, I think this thing is just way too situational. I don't think people will actually be playing this against a variety of decks in the format. So it's good to know about in case there's ever a format where like it does come up, but in this format, I don't really think it does. But it can also, I guess, stop things brought back off Graceful Revival, which is a continuous trap that lets you target a level 2 or lower monster in your graveyard, special summon that target in attack position, and then when this card leaves the field, destroy that monster. And when that monster leaves the field, destroy this card. So I guess that is something that can also stop, although Graceful Revival, pretty bad in this format. You know, in terms of things it can bring back, there aren't really too many that are actually like decent of the new ones that it could bring back potentially, it can bring back Sonic Chick, level 1 Wing Beast, 300 attack, 300 defense, that can't be destroyed by battle with a monster that has 1900 or more attack, and bring back Turbo Booster, which is not really a thing that you want to bring back from grave. It's something you want to special summon from hand, because if you have normal summon a monster this turn, you can special summon this card from your hand, and then you contribute this card to destroy one monster your opponent controls that battled one of your monsters this turn. So it's kind of funny. You can use it in conjunction with Sonic Chick just to get rid of a big monster and keep your Sonic Chick around. That's a lot of damage that you're taking, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this card in general, unless you want extension into a Synchro play. But because the minimum level on a Synchro monster is 5, that really limits it to just like, if you just want to do this like off rip with no monsters on field previously, you'd have to summon out Rose Warrior Revenge, then special summon this thing out to go into a magical android, which it's not really the best, right? That's kind of situational and like doesn't really do as much as you'd like. So I think this thing is that good. And lastly, I think you could summon out like Mecha Bunny. Like, would you want to? Probably not, because this is mainly something that you want to set. Because when this card is flip face up, you get to select one card on the field and inflict 500 damage to its controller. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one Mecha Bunny from your deck and face down defense position. So summon filter or power filter can also stop Mecha Bunny from slowing itself up, but is that worth it? Probably not, because this card is frankly not that good. Like, burn is not really the best in this format. There are some other burn cards that I'll mention here. But before I do that, I just want to say Graceful Rival, bring back all these cards. These cards could have just been brought back by Limit Reverse, which is also a little bit more flexible because it can bring back things like Mally if you really want to, Yeah, so I don't really think that these are that good. I don't think Graceful Revival's that good. There's other better cards that can take its place instead. But if we're talking about burn, there weren't many new burn cards released in this set. Doppelganger is one that also counters burn, which is kind of funny because you can activate this, and then when you take damage from the effect of a monster controls, you get to inflict the same amount of damage to your opponent. So Doppelganger basically turned burn decks that rely on monsters at least into just like a race to the bottom where like both players are losing the same amount of life points. So it's very tough for those burn decks to recover from that. But I guess there are some other burn monsters in the format, like Pursuit Chaser, level 3 Earth Machine, 1400 attack, 600 defense. That when a defense monster is destroyed by battle instead of the graveyard, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. That's something, I guess. Although this thing has relatively weak attack, this is probably not going to be the thing attacking over your opponent's defense position monsters. But maybe you're playing with like Book of Eclipse or something. I don't know. We also get Gals the Sharpies, which is actually a decent card. I think this card could potentially see some play. It's a beast, 800 attack, 800 defense. So you can reveal this card in your hand, send the top card of your deck to the graveyard. Then if it was a monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the level, times 200, and special summon this card from your hand. Otherwise, destroy this card. This is more extension. If you're playing a deck with a lot of monsters in it, you can bring this thing out, potentially do a synchro play. Unfortunately for this card, though, there aren't really too many Monster Mash decks that can really succeed in this format, I don't think. There isn't enough ways to play that. I guess if you're playing Lightsworn, that could actually be interesting. Because if you just play like a pretty monster-heavy Lightsworn deck, like you potentially mill a card and bring this thing out as further extension. So that's kind of cool. But like Lightsworn don't really need that extension, because if you're thinking about like setting up a tribute for Celestia, that needs to tribute a Lightsworn monster to actually get its effect off. And so it's like not really that good in Lightsworn either. So this would just mainly be in decks that are trying to like synchro summon, but like there aren't really many decks that want to synchro summon while also not having like a bunch of spells and traps to actually set up the synchro summons. So not that good overall, in my opinion, but it's an interesting card that will get better in later formats. If you want more extension from its various places, we've got Soul Rope here, the normal trap that says when a monster you control is destroyed by a card effect and sent to the graveyard, except during the damage step, pay 1,000 life points, special summon one level 4 monster from the deck. So that's kind of neat, especially because there's not really a restriction on that. But your monster does have to be destroyed by a card effect, so that is a bit situational there. You can potentially set that up yourself. And maybe that's the way you use this card, but I feel like if you're setting it up yourself by destroying one of your own cards, you want to get more value than just the Soul Rope, right? So I don't think this thing is that good, but it's kind of interesting to think about. We also get Space Gate. There's a continuous trap. This is each time a monster your opponent controls attacks or is attacked, place one gate counter on this card at the end of the damage step. During your main phase, you can send this card to the graveyard, supposed to summon one monster from your hand whose level is less than or equal to the number of gate counters on this card. So this is a way to just, sort of set up over time for a big push by bringing something out from your hand. However, it does rely on your opponent's monsters attacking or you attacking them. So, like, it will take some time. I don't think you can set up for a big Space Gate play in one turn. And also, continuous traps, so your opponent can just pop it. It's very telegraphed that you're setting up for that play. So, it's just a bit tricky all around. But it's like, not terrible. It's just not really that good either, in my opinion. Next up, we got Time Machine. This is a very, very old anime card, just like Kunai with Train. The normal trap that says, when a monster is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, spell summon that monster to the same field it was on, in the same battle position it was when it was destroyed. So, you know, if you've got a big monster and your opponent only has one monster to beat over it, you can then bring that back with this. Is it worth it? I don't know. I don't necessarily think it's the best thing in the world compared to some of the other revival cards in the format, but it's interesting, I guess. It's just a bit too situational for me, in my opinion. But I would say in terms of extension, the best extenders are actually big monsters that can just spell some of themselves out from hand in terms of the new cards here. The Tricky is a big one. It's a level 5 Wind Spellcaster. You can spell summon this card from your hand by discarding one card. So this is very, very, you know, versatile just extender. If you want a level 5 body on board, this is a great way to get it. And I don't think the deck's necessarily playing this all that often, but it is pretty decent if you can actually make a deck that sort of coalesces around it and actually would like the level 5 body. It's just most TeleDAD decks don't really want to make level 7s all too often, and they're generally playing level 2 tuners. So that makes it kind of weird. But maybe if you want more access to that, you could play this. Or you play, like, say, Commander, and, you know, you got a level 3 plus level 5 there. But generally, it's better to rely on Malicious. Of course, there's also a Tricky, like, specific card here, because Tricky was an anime card. It's Tricky Spell 4, the quick play spell that says send one face up the Tricky you control the graveyard, special summon Tricky tokens in defense position equal to the number of monsters your opponent controls. Tricky tokens cannot declare an attack. They're just getting more bodies on board. Is it worth it? I don't necessarily think so, but it's something you can do, I guess. Next up, we got Dragonic Knight. This is a level 7 Fire Dragon, 2800 attack, 2300 defense. When the effect of a monster or an opponent's monster is activated, the targets and destroys a card you control, you can send the targeted card to the graveyard to special summon this card from your hand. So that's very good if you can pull it off. But you got to think about, like, what monsters is actually triggering off of. It doesn't actually trigger off of too many. So I don't really think this thing is that good, even though it's very cool if you bring it out. It's just not really the best, in my opinion. Next up, we got Montage Dragon. If you want to play Dragonic Knight or the Tricky or any of those big leveled monsters, this could be something that you want to play as well. This is a level 8 Dragon, attack 0 defense. It cannot be normal summoned set, must be special summoned from your hand by sending 3 other monsters from your hand to the graveyard. It cannot be special summoned by other ways. The card's attack becomes the combined original levels of the set monsters times 300, so you can potentially buff this thing up to absurd height if you're playing a bunch of high leveled monsters. Like, if you just think about it, if you send like 3 level 8 monsters to the grave, then that's going to be 2400 times 3. So that's going to be 7200, which is a lot of damage. So this thing could be neat. Also, if you pitch Mally for it, and that's also pretty decent. But I feel like this thing is just not that good overall because, like, you have to use up so many resources to bring this thing out, and it doesn't have built-in protection. So they're just better boss monsters that you can go into. And I guess that, like, I can see that as a complaint of, you know, people playing the format and, you know, wanting to play these cool boss monsters, but just having synchro monsters be better on the face, kind of invalidating them. I can definitely see that complaint there. But I would argue that, like, things like Montage Dragon probably wouldn't even be good in previous formats before Synchros, just because there are better things you can be doing. This just costs so many resources to actually bring out. So that's my take on it. If you want other high-level monsters to pitch off Montage Dragon, you could potentially use Fiendish Engine Omega. It's a level 8 Machine Dark, 2800 attack, 2000 defense. During your end phase, special summon 1 Engine token, which is a machine token, level 1, 200 attack, 200 defense, and attack position. 1 per turn, you can have this card gain 1000 attack until the end phase. During the end phase, if the effect of this card is used, destroy this card. So basically a guy you can buff up to 3800, but it also leaves you vulnerable to your opponent's attacks because you just get out a weak monster that they can attack over. I don't know. I don't think this thing is that good. You know, as a kid, when I saw this card, I was like, okay, how can we make this work? But I just couldn't figure out a way to do it. I don't think that there's necessarily that good of one to do. But maybe someone will figure something else out. I don't know. So maybe there's something there that you can use this card for. Let me know in the comments below. But I don't really see it. Next up, we got Gravity Behemoth. This doesn't have the highest level. It's just level 6. But I figured I'd talk about it since I'm talking about all these, like, basically tribute summonable monsters and high-level monsters. This is a Dark Beast, 2300 attack, 2000 defense. It says, if it is not the first turn of the duel and there are no cards on the field, you can normal summon this card without tributing. You can destroy all field spell cards on the field. This card cannot attack the turn you activate this effect. So, kind of weird anti-synergy there, honestly, because obviously there's a field spell on field. You can't bring this thing out because that is a card on field. So, you basically have to bring this out, and then your opponent would have to activate a field spell into it, which is like, does that make sense? Not really. So the first effect and the second effect kind of conflict. You can always tribute something this out and then pop the field spell, but then it's like, what's the point of the first effect? So, and it's kind of weird that way. You could potentially use it to pop your Gear Towns. So, like, you summon this thing out, activate Gear Town, pop Gear Town, and then bring out a Galvatron. But, like, there are better ways to pop Gear Town. Like, namely, like, setting a Gear Town over a Gear Town will pop the Gear Town and then get out the Galvatron Dragon. Probably a bit better. But this is something that you can play if you want to. It looks really cool. I will say that. Next up, we've got some monsters that, want to be tribute summoned, because up till now, like these monsters here, they didn't have to be tribute summoned. They just could be, but these monsters want to be tribute summoned. Mosaic Manticore is the first one, level 8 Earth Beast, 20 under attack, 25 defense. So during the standby phase of your next turn, after you tribute summon this face-up card on the field, special summon from the graveyard as many monsters as possible that were used for tribute summon. They cannot declare an effect, and their effects are negated. So the idea behind this card, I'm pretty sure, is just to set up for a synchro play. But if you tribute summoned over the monster to set up for a synchro play, you could have just done a synchro play instead. So I don't think this thing is the best, but like, it's neat. It looks cool. I think it's a kind of neat effect, but it's just kind of awkward. I guess you can use those monsters for a tribute summon as well. So you can like Mosaic Manticore and then tribute for another Mosaic Manticore and then have material to tribute for another Mosaic Manticore. That's kind of funny, but like, I don't think this thing is the best overall. Next up, we got Red Ogre. There's a level 7 Earth, 20 under attack, 21 under defense, and when this card normal summon, you can send any number of cards from your hand to the graveyard, then target the same number of cards on the field and return those targets to the hand. So this thing is kind of cool. It's kind of like Bryanak at home, if you know what Bryanak is. But Bryanak's not in this format, so maybe you want to play it for that reason. It's also a zombie, so you can play it in a zombie deck. Maybe I should have included in the zombie section of the video. But I don't think this thing is that good. Yeah, this thing is just kind of bad. Like, zombies can get monsters on field to tribute for this, but like, I think they want to be doing other stuff instead. Next up, we got Tiger Dragon, level 6 Dragon, 24 attack, 1800 defense. When this card tributes summon by tributing a dragon monster, you can target up to 2 set cards in your opponent's spell trap zone. Destroy those targets. So this thing can just pop your opponent's spell traps, but neat. But it's just worse Mobius, basically, honestly, because Mobius just does the same thing, but without having the dragon condition. So not really much reason to play this unless you're playing a dragon deck, but dragon decks are they don't really have the best identity right now. So not really much reason to play it at all. Next up, continuing the tribute summon chain, we got Metal Shooter, the level 5 light machine, 800 attack, 800 defense. That may seem pretty weak, but its effect lets you buff up its attack right away, because when this card normal summoned, place 2 counters on it. This card gained 800 attack for each of those counters on it, and if this card would be destroyed by card effect, remove one of this card's counters instead. So that's kind of neat. However, 2400 attack, already not the strongest in this format, and dropping down to 16 to protect it is also not really that high. So I don't even think this thing is worth the sacrifice to bring it out, but it's kind of a cool card, and they actually make another card like it, Death Mosquito, level 3 Dark Insect, 500 attack, 500 defense. When the card normal summon or special summon, place 2 counters on it and gain 500 attack for each of these counters. If this card would be destroyed by battle, remove from one of these counters from play instead. So it's fine. It's like, it's just kind of fine. Like, there are better cards instead. Like, I'd say like Dark Resonator is much better than this card. Because that can actually get you value as synchro summoning as well. But I don't know, like maybe, but I can't really think of a situation where this would be better than other cards in the format, but it's something you can play if you want to. But I talked about these cards because they, want to be tribute summoned normally. There are actually some cards that must be tribute summoned, basically. So let's get into those now. Gandora, the Dragon of Destruction, the level 8 Dragon, 0 attack, 0 defense, cannot be spell summoned. You can pay half your life points, destroy as many cards on the field as possible other than this card, and if you do, banish them. This card gains 300 attack for each card destroyed this way, once per turn during the end phase. If this was normal or flip summon this turn, send it to the graveyard. So it's like, it's fine. Like, I don't know, as a finisher, it doesn't really guarantee the finish, because likely you will not have enough attack to, actually kill your opponent through this. So you're paying half your life points, losing this thing at the end of the turn, dealing a bit of attack to your opponent, but you might not even want to attack because they might have gores as well. So like, that would be the ultimate punish, where you attack in, they drop gores, and then like you basically lose the game because you lose this thing as well. Is this thing that good? Probably not. I think it's an iconic card from like the anime, so it's kind of cool, but overall this thing's pretty bad. Next up, we got Darkness Destroyer, the level 7 Dark Monster Fiend, 2300 attack, 1800 defense, cannot be spell summoned. This card can attack twice during each battle phase. If this card attacks a monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. Is that worth it for a level 7 monster? Not really. Like, look at the attacks on the other level 7 monsters I've talked about, and it's much higher. They can be spell summoned as well. So just being able to attack twice and inflict piercing, not really good enough to actually have this thing in your deck, in my opinion at least. But since we're talking about tribute monsters, there actually was counterplayed tribute monsters released in this set. Intercept, the counter trap. It's actually only when a monster is tribute summoned with 1 tribute, take control of that monster. So it won't stop things like Darkness Destroyer or Mosaic Manticore or things like that, but it will stop the Monarchs, which is pretty good. Although, of course, the Monarchs will still be able to get out their effects, so that's something. So is this better than like pulling the rug or something like that? Probably not, but it's a funny card. It's funnier than pulling the rug, so that might have some value for you there. Next up, we've got the last of the tribute monster that I want to talk about here. And this is actually one that is not really something that you tribute summon out. But I wanted to save this for last because it leads into another set of monster that I want to talk about here. So this is Big Piece Golem, the level 5 Earth, Rock, 21 attack, 0 defense. If your opponent controls a monster, you can control no monster, you can normal summon this card without tribute. So that basically seems like a worse Cyber Dragon on the face. It is a worse Cyber Dragon if it operates alone. But it's got some partners here. It's got Medium Piece Golem and Small Piece Golem. And these both have the effect where if they're summoned, if we control a Big Piece Golem, you get to summon out the other one. So Medium Piece summons out Small Piece, and Small Piece summons out Medium Piece. And that monster is effective in the game while it's face up on the field. So that means that, like, you know, you can't just go infinite off this combo, basically. But that gets all three out on field. You might wonder, why have all three out on field? What do? Well, they can actually go into Multiple Piece Golem. There's a level 7 Rock Fusion, 2600 attack, 1300 defense, made with Big Piece Golem and Medium Piece Golem. So not Small Piece. I don't know why they left out Small Piece. But at the end of the battle phase, if this card attacked or was attacked, you can return it to the extra deck. Then if all the fusion material monsters that were used for the fusion summon this card are in your graveyard, you can special summon them. So, I mean, is that worth it? Probably not. It's at the end of the battle phase. So, you know, you can't even attack with those monsters afterwards to get more damage in. So what's the point of it? I don't really know, honestly. It's just a cool fusion monster, I guess, here. And I guess that's sort of where it will lie. Yeah, I don't really think this combo is that good. This also doesn't contact fuse. This is just a hard fusion summon, so you need to use poly. So it's like not even the best in that capacity. So yeah, I think this strategy is not really that good. But they weren't the only rocks released in the set. I mean, I didn't cover rocks in the type support things, because they didn't really get specific rock support. But there was actually another rock, Ganogo, the level 3 Earth Rock, 1350 attack, 1600 defense. And at the effect that at the end of the damage step, if this card battled an opponent's monster, change that monster face down defense position. So it's basically like something like Card Rotator, except a little bit better, because it sets it down opposed to just switch to defense, because Card Rotator says, send one card from your hand to the graveyard, change the battle position of all monster opponent controls, face down position monsters, or flip the face up attack position. So, yeah, this affects all of them, unlike Ganogo, which only affects one, but you don't necessarily want to change the battle position of all of them. It's less precise than something that just changes the battle position of one. Not that Ganogo you really have a choice over, unless you attack into the monster directly itself. But it also doesn't set it face down. And that can actually be a downside when you have cards like Search Striker, which actually do want things to be set face down. This is a 1600 attack, 1200 defense point warrior monster. And it says, if this card attacks face down such as a monster, you can destroy the monster immediately with this card effect without flipping it face up or applying damage calculation. If you do this card's change to defense position at the end of the battle phase, and then this card's battle position cannot be changed until the end of your next turn, except with a card effect. So, this can sort of benefit from Ganogo, setting things down. Mad Archfiend can also benefit from that. It's a level 4 Dark Fiend. 1800 attack, 0 defense. So if this card attacks defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. If this pays up attack position card is targeted for an attack, changes the defense position. So this is another card that can benefit from switching your opponent's monster to defense, although it's not really the best. There are just better beaters that you can have. And for the amount of defense position damage it will deal, it's not really worth it, but that's my opinion of it at least. And if you're using things to switch things to defense position, you can also use Lineage of Destruction with this stuff to sort of get in for more damage. The normal trap that says activate only during a turn in which you destroyed a defense position monster your opponent controlled. Select one level 8 monster you control during this turn. The selected monster can attack twice. So this is very clearly meant to be used with like Red Dragon Archfiend, because that destroys things with its effect. But you can also use it with other things too. Like you can use it with a Search Striker, for instance, to then give a level 8 monster control the ability to attack twice. So like, you don't have to use it with that, but in my opinion, it's very clearly meant to be used with that. But very, very cool card art here as well. Now, you may be wondering, if you're a defensive player, what do I do to stop this, right? And you actually do have some ways to deal with it. Broken Blocker is something you can do. There's a normal trap that says activate only when a defense position monster you control whose defense is higher than its attack is destroyed by battle. It's special summon up to 2 monsters with the same name as that monster from your deck in face-up defense position. So if you've got a big defense position monster that your opponent gets over somehow with their biggest monster, maybe you still protect yourself from the smaller monsters at least. And there are also some decent defense position monsters that you can use it on, like Ghost Guard at the level 4. 0 attack point, 900 defense point monster that says when a face-up monster you control is selected as an attack target, you can change the target to this card. When this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, one face-up monster your opponent controlled loses 1000 attack until the end phase. So this also prevents, like, let's say they've got the level 8 monster that's attacking again. It might prevent that from actually getting over the other Ghost Guard that you bring out off of Broken Blocker. I don't know. It's something potentially. You can also bring out something like Twin Shield Defender, level 4 Earth Warrior. 0 attack, 1600 defense. So when this card is destroyed by battle, instead of the graveyard, you can have the current attack of one face-up monster your opponent controls until the end phase, which can also be used to sort of protect yourself from other things. Now, are these that good? Not really. And if you want to sort of like bait out these effects, you can use something like Battle Mania, which also is not really that good. There's a normal trap that says activate only during your opponent's standby phase. All face-up monsters your opponent controls are changed to attack position and cannot change the wild position all turn. All monsters your opponent currently controls must attack this turn if able. Now, the downside of this is, while yes, it can sort of get them attacking into your defense position monsters, you either get off these effects or deal damage. It only applied in standby phase, so if your opponent then goes for a synchro play afterwards, they don't need to attack in with those monsters, or a tribute play, or any other play that just remove their monster from field to go into something else. They don't really have to, worry about this effect. So this thing, not really that good in my opinion, in this format at least. And it's funny though, it's neat. I like that a lot of unique cards are being added to the format, because I think that always makes for a more fun time. But I don't really think this thing is that good. You can potentially use this to also trigger the effect of something like Confusion Chaff if you want to. There's a normal trap that says activate only when your opponent declares a second direct attack during the same battle phase. Conduct battle between the attacking monster and the first monster that attacked directly. Other effects cannot be activated during this battle. So like if your opponent attacks in the wrong order, you can potentially use this thing and punish them for it. But frankly, this thing is very, very situational. If you want something to punish your opponent attacking in like directly, you get Gores, so that's just better to use in pretty much every case. So the thing is not really that good. Of course, if you want to use any of these like pretty bad normal traps, again, you've got Trap of Darkness, the normal trap that says if your life point is 3,000 or less, which it might be because you're probably playing a pretty bad deck. Pay 1,000 life points, then target one normal trap in your graveyard, except Trap of Darkness. This card's effect becomes that target's activated effect, then banish that target. Now, there are some normal traps that you'd want to do that on, things like Torrential Tribute, Mirror Force, etc. But there's just a couple things that keep this thing from being that good. One is the situational sort of nature of it, where your life point have to be 3,000 or less. And a lot of decks in this format, if they get you down below that point, like you're kind of like you're dying that turn, kind of. And so that's a bit tricky. It also costs 1,000 life points as well. So you basically have to be between 3,000 and 1,100, basically, or 1,001. And that can be kind of tough to do. Like if you're lowering your own life points through something like Solemn Judgment, then you might be down below 1,000 before you can actually use this thing. So that's not really that good. So yeah, I think this thing is just way too situational. And also you have to have the normal trap in your graveyard already. And also, if your opponent's got DD Crow, they can just use that to get rid of this thing. So also, I don't think this thing can be activated in the damage step because it doesn't directly, modify the attacking defense of a thing, even if it targets a trap that would. So that also is not really that good. So this thing is just pretty bad overall. There are some other normal traps you can use with it though. These are the last normal traps that were released in this set that I couldn't really find a way to fit otherwise. And I did have some more cards that I'll talk about afterwards that I really couldn't fit anywhere else, but these will sort of finish off the traps and the theming together, I guess. But Remote Revenge is a normal trap. This is activated only when a monster you control is targeted by a spell trap or monster effect that destroys one monster in the field. Switch the target to an appropriate monster your opponent controls. I think the nice thing about this is that I'm pretty sure it can't be stopped by Stardust, because Stardust would have to respond to the thing that's initially trying to destroy it, where Remote Revenge doesn't directly destroy, it just switches the target of a card. So I think this does dodge around Stardust. Is it worth it to play it because it dodges around Stardust? I don't think so. Compulse, Phoenix Wing, things like that, those dodge around Stardust a bit better than this does. So I don't really think this thing is worth it, but it's kind of interesting to think about. We also got Virus Cannon, another anime card. Really, really bad one, though. Normal trap that says tribute any number of monsters except tokens. Your opponent sends an equal number of spells from their deck to the graveyard, or all their spells lower than the number of tributes. So there aren't really many use cases for this. If you think your opponent's down low on cards and they've got really good spells left, maybe use Virus Cannon and send the remaining spells to their graveyard. But like that edge case will very rarely come up. And so you don't really want to use this. It also depletes your field, which is also something you don't really want to do. So this thing's pretty bad overall. But lastly, let's talk about some miscellaneous monsters that I couldn't really talk about elsewhere. I just couldn't figure out a way to fit them in. Kunoichi, level 4 Wind Warrior, 1800 attack, 1000 defense. When this card changes control, its new controller discards one random card. So you can potentially use this for like Creature Swap or Chance Spy to get your opponent to pitch a card. But you're also giving them like a decent monster. So is it worth it? Maybe not. Kind of situational. I don't really think it's the best. We also have Twin Barrel Dragon, level 4, Dark Machine, 1700 attack, 200 defense. It says, if this card summoned, target one card your opponent controls, toss a coin twice. If the result is 2 heads, destroy it. So this is kind of like Blowback Dragon, Barrel Dragon, something along those lines. It could pop your opponent's stuff potentially, but you have to get the 1/4 chance to, actually get that, which is not the best. So I don't think this thing is that good, but it's kind of neat. And if it does pull off, then that's kind of cool. Next up, we've got another machine monster, Machine Lord This is a level 4 Earth machine, 1600 attack, 1500 defense. If this card can attack all monster your opponent controls once each. If this card attacks or is attacked, your opponent takes no battle damage. So you can't really use this to ODK. You just use it to clear your opponent's things, but like it's too weak to really do that most of the time. So this thing pretty bad. Next up, Toy Magician, a spellcaster, level 4 light, 1600 attack, 1500 defense. You can set this card from your hand to your spell and trap zone as a spell. During the end phase, if this set card in your spell and trap card zone was destroyed by an opponent's card effect instead of the graveyard this turn, spell summon this card. If this card flip summon, destroys spells and traps on the field, equal to the number of Toy Magicians on the field. This card mind-blowing, mainly because, like, I have no idea what they want you to do with it. Like, setting it as a spell trap doesn't really do much. You just get it out of your hand for certain things, but like it's kind of awkward. Just going to sit in your back row doing nothing probably most of the time. Like flip summoning it is kind of an inefficient way to pop spell and traps. Like you got better ways to do that. So like I don't really know what the point of this card is. It's a very weird card overall. So I don't think it's worth playing. Maybe someone can figure out something to do with it. Then more power to you. But I have no idea. I've hit a wall with it. And lastly, it's just we got a rituals monster here, Super Warline, level 7, 23 attack, 21 defense. They're a better ritual monster that you can use, and then the Warline ritual for it. So that's gonna do it for all the new cards in this format. Wow, that was a long one. That was probably the longest one of these that I've done, mainly because there were a lot of new cards to cover, and so it went through a lot of stuff. But I'm not gonna end the video there. Don't worry. We've got to cover the best deck in the format right now, which is TeleDAD, and we got to see exactly what that looks like, just so you can get a little bit more context for what this format will basically be. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. And I'll make this section short, so I won't really go too long. But TeleDAD as a format, the main deck has like kind of been quote unquote solved. Like, and most of the recent retro tournaments, this sort of exact main deck list has been the one that's done well. Now that could just be because like people pick up the format and they look at whatever did well in the past and they just use that. But I mean, this seems to be putting up consistent results, so maybe this is the way to do it. I don't know. We'll have to see if more experimentation happens with this main deck and what other people do, and if that shifts over time as the meta changes. Because I think, like, with any future format, the meta can shift a little bit based on, like, you just bringing in counters for this sort of main meta deck. But we'll also see what happens. But it's also kind of astonishing that this is very, very similar to the original deck that won SJC Houston back in 2009, piloted by Jerry Wang. So the deck is like pretty solved in terms of like the general what the deck does, and mainly what it does is it draws a ton with things like D-Draw with the Hero Engine, and also Allures of Darkness with now 3 copies. Rhoda's as well 3 allows it to search out pretty much anything it needs to fuel the D-Draws and Allures, and it basically gets Mally and Grave, like banishes Mally, brings out another Mally, gets out Krebins with Emergency Teleport, goes into level 8, does that stuff. It's drawn into its good traps, hopefully, like Royal Oppression, or Crush Card or Solemn or things like that. And it basically locks the opponent out of being able to play the game while also having a very, very strong board itself. It also has access to DAD, which you'll notice that pretty much every card in its deck is dark. So you're fueling that as you're doing this stuff. And it is just incredibly, incredibly powerful, incredibly, incredibly consistent because, you know, you just have so much draw power, so much filtration power as well. And it's very good. Now, I will say in a tier 0 format, there are anti-meta decks that can sort of capitalize on this deck's weakness. So you might see some other decks do well that like rely on banish stuff to just prevent things from hitting the grave. You get a lot of these things one hit the grave, like the Mally, Plague, etc. And you've got things like Dark Gruffer to fuel the graveyard as well. But again, the deck has a lot of draw power, so you can draw into things like Tornado and Heavy Storm a lot of the time. So even that is not necessarily enough to stop it. It can be, but it not necessarily is going to be enough over the course of a tournament, for instance. But very, very good deck overall, and I think it's just cracked. It's very, very good. Looking at the Synchro pool, just to see, you know, sort of context for what I was talking about with the Synchro monster that you go into, it mainly focuses on level 8, because you'll notice that Krebins plus Mally is 8, and that's the main combination you're going into here. So we got Stardust time 3, because this thing is really, really good to bring out. It can be beaten over by your opponent's monsters, so you know, you can't just sit on this the entire game, but it's very, very just good to have extra copies if you need them. We got Thought Ruler times 2, so this is good to bring in instead of Stardust if you're worried about like targeted negation, or not targeted negation, but targeted removal that Stardust would not stop, things like Compulsory Evacuation Device or Phoenix Wind Blast here. Red Dragon Archfiend for the edge cases. Goyo, level 6, very, very good to bring in. This version's playing 2. This is just the last winning list from the last TeleDAD tournament that was held in Format Library. This was built by GMYFS, but it copied a lot of other lists that were going around at the time. So, you know, this extra deck is their extra deck as well. So they chose to do 2 Go Guardians. I think maybe this could be at 3 as well, but their extra deck space can be a little bit tight here. I'm not sure really what you'd cut down outside of it. Maybe you cut down on 1 Colossal Fighter. This card's at 3 though, because again, 8 is your bread and butter. So it makes sense why you're maxing on all of these 8s. You do have the edge cases though. You've got 1/7 in form of Black Rose and Psychic Life Transfer as well. You've got the Magical Android is the only 5 you can really go into. And you'll look at the deck, you don't really have many ways to do that. You've got Sangan plus level 2, and that's kind of your only way to do it, unless you take control of an opponent's monster with BrainCon. But yeah, so these are the monsters you're going into, and those are kind of what you need. Those are the ones that can get you to victory a lot of the time. And, you know, if your opponent tries to stop that, you got Solemns, you got Oppressions, you got a lot of things to do with that. So the side deck is also teched out to face a number of things. You got Ryos here to stop searching. You've got Gores, if, you know, you're not going to have the Oppressions up. This is going to be very good. DD Crows to stop Graveyard Reliant decks. You know, Light Imprisonment Mirror to stop Lightsworn, things like that. It's a lot of different options for you here. And so this deck is very, very good. I'll be showing off gameplay of it shortly on the channel, so don't worry, that's going to be coming soon. But yeah, I'm excited to try out this deck. Played around a bit. I've enjoyed the games I've played with it so far, and hopefully you'll enjoy them too. But that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed as always. Sorry for the very, very long one, but I had a lot to go through. So if you enjoyed it, leave a like down below. Also subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And until next time, I've been Ben from YG Ocean Zero. I'm signing off. Peace.